We are just back from executive session. Can I get a motion to return to public session?
Move.
Second.
Thank you. Call to order. Opening statement. Meetings of the board are open to the public, and all members of the community should feel free to participate. There are two opportunities for the public to speak. The first is at the beginning of the meeting for the agenda items only, and the second is at the end of the meeting for other items. Any individual desiring to speak shall give his or her name, address, and the group, if any, that is represented. The presentation shall be as brief as possible, but no more than 3 minutes per individual. There are certain matters that may be brought before the board that cannot be immediately addressed in public. Such matters may be referred by the president to a board member, to a board committee, and or to the superintendent for consideration and or resolution. The board vests in its president or other presiding officer authority to terminate the remarks of any individual if he or she deems it is in the best interest of those present to do so. Michael, can we have a roll call?
Mr. Reddy.
Here.
Mr. Wall.
Here.
Mrs. Briamonte is currently absent. Mrs. Zhang is currently absent. Dr. Kalor is currently absent. Mrs. Tasillo.
Here.
Mr. Buckley.
Here.
Mr. Damari.
Here.
Mr. Mann.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mike. Can we rise for a flag salute? Well, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. We were here last week in our committee of the whole. Tonight is our public action or a public meeting where we will be taking action on a number of items today. Before we start, I'd like to welcome back our students. Anuga, who is our senior representative, so thank you for coming back for your senior year. And next to her is Jack Powers. So for me, being on the board the last decade, I've known Jack at least a decade. Rising junior on the football team. He got out of football practice early today, so this is good. I want to say I know Jack longer than anyone on this board, but unfortunately I don't, because there's someone sitting a few to my left, Kim, if he wants to say a few words. And after that, Jack, if you want to say anything, feel free. If not, thank you for your time. We'll make sure you get out of here on Wednesday so you go home, and I know you have a big course load and everything like that. So welcome.
So Jack is my nephew, so I've known him his entire life. And he is absolutely a great kid and couldn't be prouder to have you up here tonight and to be a role model for my kids and all the other cousins. So welcome.
And I do think this is the first time we had a football player and lacrosse player all in one. So thank you and welcome. So. All right, so tonight we do have one presentation. Dr. Irwin, who is in the audience. Where is Dr. Irwin? There she is down here. Dr. Irwin is going to present to us on the fall student achievement update. Like last year, I think the last time she did an update, I think it was the spring update. So this will be the fall one. So Dr. Irwin, take it away.
Is it on presentation? Good evening, Holmdel community. My name is Dr. Jessica Irwin, Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Per state statute, chief school administrators shall report final results of annual assessments to district boards of education and members of the public at a public meeting within 60 days of receipt of information from the department. Tonight, we will be sharing required assessment results from the following assessments: the New Jersey Student Learning Assessments for Math, ELA, and Science, the WIDA Access for ELS, the Dynamic Learning Maps. As part of this comprehensive update, data from advanced placement assessments and high school proficiency data will also be shared. So I know it's difficult sometimes to comprehend a lot of numerical information off of a slide. So for anyone that wants to take their time to unpack what all these results mean, this will be available on our website following tonight's presentation and additionally posted on our curriculum webpage. So before we begin, these are our objectives for tonight. This includes the presentation of district performance on the aforementioned assessments. And we will also be sharing an inventory of practices the district has pursued or is pursuing in reference to the achievement results that we have. So we're going to begin with NJSLA. So the NJSLA is administered to students in grades 3 to 9 in English language arts. In math, it is administered to students in grades 3 to 8 and end of course assessments in Algebra 1, Geometry, or Algebra 2. So basically it includes up to our freshmen. In science, the NJSLA is administered only to students in grades 5, 8, and 11. And there are 5 performance levels, whereas the 4 is proficiency and 5 is exceeding expectations. When we discuss proficiency, as you'll see in the slide, we're talking about students that scored a 4 or above. So the results from the assessments will be presented by content area, beginning with English language arts. We are going to present historical data across the last 5 years, in addition to our performance where we are versus the state. Although not available yet, I've been promised that the district factor group achievement results are going to be in next month, in which time I can compare how Holmdel performance is doing when talking about comparable or like districts. However, for tonight, our frame of reference is going to be how students in Holmdel are performing versus the state, as those average numbers have been released. So we're going to begin by taking a look at our 5-year snapshot data for English language arts. As denoted in this slide, our overall proficiency in ELA increased from 75% in 21-22 to 80% in 22-23. We are happy to share that performance is up 5% from last year. So now we're going to be looking a little bit about grade level snapshot data. So the chart on this page represents ELA performance by grade level in grades 3 to 6. The numbers we started, it's a 5-year trend. So the bar farthest to the left is data beginning in 2016, 2017. And then the following bars just represent each year after that. So just as a reminder, during COVID, no assessments were given in the 2019-20 school year and the 2020-21 school year. So there is a 2-year gap in data. So for instance, you could see that third column is 18-19, and then the next year is 21-22. I'm excited though to present this because with 1 year of solid data behind us, we can really make some inferences about how we're doing. So in grades 3 to 6, performance increased at all levels, increasing from 71% to 74% in grade 3, from 79% to 80% in grade 4, from 84% to 88% in grade 5, and from 82% to 85% in grade 6. And at all these grade levels, the district exceeded the state performance by about 30 percentage points overall. Okay, so next we're going to move on to our students in grades 7, 8, and 9. So a target area, if anyone recalls, that emerged from the 22-23 data last year was supporting students in grades 7 to 9, especially in the area of literacy instruction. Although we are still working on closing any achievement gaps that still linger as a result of COVID, performance increased at every grade level in these grades as well. In grade 7, we see performance in 21-22 from 70 to 77%. In grade 8, from 68% to 75%. And then again in grade 9, from 71% to 78%. So in all 3 grade levels, we knew we had a job to do, and we're closing bands by 7 percentage points, which is significant because having looked at data for a long time now in my career, anything over 5 points it's beyond the standard of error. So we're happy to see that we have a 7-point increase in these grade levels. Okay. In addition to overall performance, Districts are also required to report aggregated and disaggregated subgroup data in any category in which there are more than 10 students. The following 4 charts represent score distributions for the following subgroups, including special education, English language learners, and then we also have demographic information such as by race and the free and reduced lunch status or the economically advantaged and disadvantaged status. These charts show performance distributions across all grade level bands, in which red is not meeting expectations, orange is partially meeting expectations, yellow is approaching expectations, green is meeting expectations, and blue is exceeding expectations. From this data, we can glean that 41% of our special education students met or exceeded proficiency in English language arts, and 70% of our students with 504s met proficiency in English language arts. Moving on to our English language learners. I'm sorry, my voice is a little. 42% of our students met proficiency. Those are our current English language learners. In addition, which I think is actually an incredible feat, is L status or English language learner status remains 3 years after the students are no longer in the program. And what we can see here is that 82% of our former English language learners, so students that prior received ESL interventions, were proficient or exceeded expectations. And because these students are learning English, I think that's pretty incredible. When we move on to demographic data, our overall proficiency is comparable by race, whereas 91% of Asian students met or exceeded expectations in comparison to 73% of Black students, 74% of Hispanic students, 76% of white students, and 86% for students that are 2 or more races. As you can see, the differential, just by looking at the blue and the green, is the amount of the bands in which a lot of students are exceeding expectations. Finally, looking at our performance by economic status, 65% of economically disadvantaged students met or exceeded expectations, compared to 79% of non-economically disadvantaged students. Again, the differential here is really the range of proficiency, as a significantly greater percentage of non-economically disadvantaged students scored in the exceeding range. Okay. So before we move on to math, we just want to take a moment to tie it all together. So I call this, so what, now what? So what is the data saying? Now what do we do about it? The chart on the left shows a quick year-over-year change at all grade levels, showing that from grades 3 to 9, proficiency increased in 2023 in all grades. Some initiatives to address and strengthen our ELA program are on the right. For our younger students, this includes better foundational assessment tools in the primary grades and more focus on phonemic awareness and phonics. Although students in grades K to 2 are not assessed formally, we have years of empirical evidence, both locally and nationally, that suggests foundational literacy is the linchpin to ELA achievement as students mature. So we want to make sure they're set on a really good path. In our intermediate grades, we will be fully implementing the Into Reading program in grades 3 to 5. About half of our teachers in grades 4 and 5 piloted this program last year, showing strong gains already. We will continue our 2-year partnership with the Rutgers Literacy Initiative in grades K to 6, and we are very excited to offer this professional development to our teachers this year in grades 7 to 12 as well. Other efforts to improve performance at these levels include the implementation of Study Sync in grade 6, a cycle elective focused exclusively on writing at SATs. We will also be researching ELA programs in our secondary grades prior to the new standards that are going to be unveiled next fall. At all levels, we have restructured our administrative oversight and support to maximize content-specific support to our teachers. For instance, our K to 6 supervisor who previously did math, ELA, social studies, she's going to be focused on humanities, and then we also have in the audience, I have Miss Latter who's focused exclusively on math, and that will allow us to focus science with Miss Colleen. So we're excited about where we're going, and at all grade levels, we have put significant emphasis on tier 1 interventions in the classroom via the umbrella of our multi-tiered system of supports.
Can you just go back one slide? Just DIBELS. Can you?
Oh, DIBELS is an assessment.
Okay, just for the public. And MTSS?
Multi-tiered system of supports. Those are our interventions for students before they're referred.
Thanks.
Okay. So moving on to math, we're going to change gears a second. So here's our 5-year district snapshot of overall performance. As you can see, performance over the last 5 years has hovered around the same point, which is the 70th percentile. Our 22-23 performance data remains 68%, similar to performance in 21-22. So we were at 68 last year and we're at 68 again this year. Now we're going to go through the same process that we did in ELA, just switch it up for math. So in grades 3 to 6, performance increased from 79% to 81% in grade 4, from 72% to 76% in grade 5, and remained stagnant in grade 6 at 71%. In grade 3, our performance declined slightly from 80% to 77%. However, I just want to note that this is a new cohort of students who are testing for the first time, and research has also come out that the students, whether or not that's the case locally, but the students most impacted by the pandemic are students in grades 3 and 4. So I don't think we should take too much caution with grade 3 where it is right now. The gap between state and district performance is even bigger in math. So even though our scores are a little bit lower than they are in ELA, whereas in ELA, we were about 30 points above the state, in math, we're at least 35 points above the state in all grade levels. Okay, so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about math performance for our students approaching the secondary grades. So looking at SATs, the majority of students take 7th grade math, with a smaller portion of students taking algebra. In grade 8, course options include grade 8 math, algebra, honors algebra, and geometry, with a small number, which is about less than 70% of students taking 8th grade math. In grade 7, I'm sorry. In grade 7, our performance is relevant compared to prior test administrations. I'm sorry, what's going on here?
And
in grade 8,
Wi-Fi works throughout the thing, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, it works. So I have a back lobby here and then a spot over here, and it also works outside right here by the.
Okay, I'm sorry about that for the pause. Okay. I'm going to start this slide over again. Looking at math performance at SATs, the majority of students take 7th grade math, with a smaller portion of students taking algebra. In grade 8, course options include grade 8 math, algebra, honors algebra, and honors geometry, whereas about 70% of students take grade 8 math. In grade 7, our performance is relevant to prior test administrations, with 63% of students meeting or exceeding expectations, as was in prior years. In grade 8, our performance declined from 20% to 10%, as observed in this chart. Although this data represents a smaller number of students, as we know most students are taking algebra in 8th grade, it is a significant area of concern for us and an area to tackle. Okay. All right, I've got a lot to say about this slide. All right, so when we look at Algebra 1 performance, I've disaggregated it overall and then by school. Overall, 55% of our students were proficient at the end of course exams in Algebra 1. That includes 65% of students at SATs and 32% of students at the high school. To improve overall performance in Algebra 1, it's critical that we address the performance of our 8th grade students. In the middle chart, you can see that the district once scored in the 90th percentile range. However, that decreased to 68% in 2022 and further declined to 65% in 2023. Interestingly enough, the sharp decline in math performance at SATs, for example, 92% in the 18-19 school year to 68% in the 21-22 school year, reflects the introduction of it's it's not the only cause, but one of the reasons when we're inferring data could be about the rotating schedule, which was introduced in 2019. So for anyone that knows the SAT schedule more intimately, students don't have the same, they don't necessarily take the same course every single day. So they're going from about 500 minutes of math in grade 6 to less than 200 minutes by the time they're in grade 7 and 8. So that is a variable that we want to consider, especially as we consider our high school building schedules and aligning them with SATs. Another data point that may be reflected here, in addition to the rotating schedule, is an increase in the volume of waivers. For instance, more than 50% of our students at SATs are enrolled in honors math courses, and over 120 waivers were signed last year alone in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math. Although we will discuss in more detail at our upcoming committee of the whole, the courses with a statistically significant difference in performance between waiver and non-waiver students were Math 6, Math 7, Honors Algebra 7, and Honors Geometry. As the majority of Math 7 students roll into Honors Algebra 1, provided they can maintain an 86% course average, a significant number of our students sitting in Honors Algebra last year were previously waived into 7th grade Honors Math. And we say that that's important just because there's a lot of prerequisite skills that students need to master to demonstrate content proficiency in algebra. So when we look at the chart on the right, we're taking a more micro look at performance at SATs to draw inferences regarding the decline in performance outcomes at these levels. From the data on the right, we can infer that student placement is a significant factor in content mastery. The students most ready for advanced coursework, i.e. algebra, are identified early on in the math sequence. So if you could see at the top where it says Honors Algebra 7, those blue dots represent our students, and the green line furthest to the right is exceeding expectations. So you can see based on this scatter plot that more students are exceeding expectations for those who take algebra earlier versus it declines a little bit in Honors Algebra 8, and then no students are in that performance band in regular Algebra 8. Evidence suggests that students taking algebra in 8th grade could benefit from another year in developing prerequisite skills, such as participation in Math 8. This is significant as we look to further streamline our course offerings at the middle and high school levels. From this data, we can infer that spending more time with prerequisite skills prior to sitting in algebra will have higher achievement outcomes in the future and set students up successfully. More so when we think about course progressions, we can consider our senior class. So in our current senior class, there's 223 of them. 126 students took algebra, or they were here for 8th grade, and during that time, they took algebra as part of their math class. Of that number, only 1/3 of the students taking algebra as an 8th grader ever achieved entry into an AP level calculus class. Therefore, at least 2/3 of students, for at least 2/3 of our students who take algebra in 8th grade, 2/3 of them, they're going to their final math course will most likely be pre-calculus. So we say all that to say is if we're all going to, if you took algebra 1, then geometry, then algebra 2, and then took pre-calculus, you can start algebra 1 in 9th grade and not feel like you're held back by not doing it in 8th grade. So I just want to say, like, sometimes it's good to go slow and steady and to master what you're doing before we move on to the next level. Great. I'm going to move on from that. And then finally, we close out with our geometry and algebra 2 performance. So you can see it went from 66% to 73%, and then 90% to 87% in algebra 2. Just as a reminder, though, this is typically just our 9th graders that are taking this courses, so they're already up a performance level. And then finally, similar to ELA, the following charts represent performance data by subgroup. As seen above, 27% of our special education students met or exceeded proficiency, and 44% of our students with 504s met proficiency. Moving on to our English language learners, 46% of our students that are currently classified met proficiency, and 88% of former English language learners met proficiency or exceeded proficiency. When we look at demographic data, our overall proficiency is incomparable by race, whereas 84% of Asian students met or exceeded expectations, 61% of Black students met or exceeded expectations, 59% of Hispanic students 64% of white students, and 73% for students that are 2 or more races. As you can see, the differential in these data sets is really the amount of students that are exceeding expectations. It's similar across all of them, except for our first top demographic slot. Finally, looking at performance by economic status, we see that 39% of economically disadvantaged students met or exceeded expectations in math, compared to 68% of non-economically disadvantaged students, a sharper distinction than was observed prior in ELA. So what, now what? So the chart on the left shows a quick year-over-year change at all grade levels, showing performance increased in the intermediate grades and geometry with small declines or no changes at all at other grade levels. As discussed prior, our biggest loss is Math 8. To address performance trends, we're going to be implementing a few initiatives or continuing on with other ones. That includes the dedication of a supervisor solely working with math. Because Gwen is going to be overseeing K-12, it's going to allow us to really work on our vertical articulation as well, so there's coherence from one grade level to the next. The math team is also going to focus this year on providing consistent and coherent math experience, starting with common assessments that are skill-based. This is critical, as good assessments means good data, means good insights. Other efforts to improve math performance include the purchase of new digital resources, the creation of a new math class in Math Lab 7, and the high impact tutoring grant, which we are applying for, which is on the board meeting, I believe, this month. So to wrap it all up, before we move on to science performance, this really is the snapshot of everything I just discussed. I want to briefly highlight our score distributions across all tests and then talk about achievement mobility. In ELA, 48% of students met expectations, 32% exceeded. In comparison to math, 48% of students met expectations and 20% exceeded. Moving to the right, we're going to talk about achievement mobility. Achievement mobility is a 2-year snapshot. Essentially, this is cohort data. So when we talk about our kids in 22-23, when we compare them to 21-22, how many students stayed at the same performance level, how many increased the performance level, or how many declined the performance level. So, and when we say performance levels, I'm talking that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that was shared in the beginning of this presentation. So we see that in ELA, 60% of students stayed at the level they were at with the last administration, and 26% moved up, 14% moved down. In math, 63% of students stayed at the same performance level as they did the year prior, with 13% moving up and 23% moving down. I remember I did this slide last year, and our achievement mobility, the red bars were almost 38%, 40% in some areas. So it's nice to see that we've cut that in half. Okay, finally, science. Science is not administered to all students. It is administered, as I said previously, just to students in grades 5, 8, and 11. Unlike ELA, in which there's 5 performance bands, same as in math, there's only 4 levels in science, whereas a 3 represents appropriate grade level understanding and a 4 is advanced understanding. This test, in comparison to the NJSLA and PARCC, is still relatively new. So it was first implemented right prior to the pandemic as a pilot, and then last year was the first full year. This is the second full year. Okay. So at first look at these numbers, it's, for instance, it's 55% in grade 5, 38% grade 8, 58% grade 11. They'd be like, wow, that's kind of low. Performance overall is low in the state. I took the liberty today of looking up last year's performance in comparable districts. No one is really achieving beyond the 55th percentile. Not that this is what we want to aspire to, but we are comparable to other districts. And I believe we're in the 10% at all, the top 10% in the state in all grade levels in science. We still are going to be working on closing these gaps, but we did increase from last year in all areas, moving from 53% to 55 in grade 5, from 34 to 38 in grade 8, and from 46 to 53 in grade 11. And as you can see, the state performance, we are about 20 to 30 points behind, depending on the grade level, or ahead. So to support continued growth in science, we have, once again, we're restructuring administrative oversight. So we have one supervisor dedicated exclusively on science and can provide vertical articulation and support for coherence of program. We're also moving to a new instructional model in grades 6 to 8 called Open SciEd, which is a hands-on program designed to peak critical thinking and sense-making via exploration and experimentation. An analysis of our sub-performance topics shows that students are not as proficient in earth and space science and compared to other areas. So that's where we're going to be putting an emphasis on this year. In addition, we're going to continue to refine sense-making practices and we'll assess our program and performance for any program adjustments that need to take place via our standard aligned common assessments in the Inner Orbit platform. Thanks to the generous support of the HFEE and the Village PSA, even though our younger kids aren't going to take the science assessments of 5th grade, they now have more science labs where they can feel like scientists and start working on those critical literacies so that they're really invested in this work. Okay. The next assessment result we're going to share is the ESL performance as measured by the WIDA Access for ELS. I will address that our ESL population has doubled in the last few years. Our current roster is almost 50 students from multiple languages, led under the direction of Ms. Arciero, who has put much time and effort into this programming. So the access for assessment is given to all English language learners and measures academic English in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Students receive a score of 1 to 6, whereas 4.5 is typically the level in which student support services discontinue as it reflects bridging proficiency in English as opposed to the native language. So with that said, here is our performance by school where our ESLs are situated. As can be predicted based on what research tells us about language acquisition, students are able to demonstrate language proficiency the earlier they are immersed in a language, which is why it doesn't surprise me to see that even at Village and Indian Hill, we have students that are exceeding that proficiency cutoff for native bilingualism. In order to close these gaps and promote proficiency in all of our schools and at all of our grade levels, regardless of when students enter the country, we're going to be putting more instructional resources in place to round out our robust program. This includes acquisition of Achieve 3000, Learning A to Z, and Extempore, which are just platforms that are really designed for students that are developing language proficiencies. We have also revised our curriculum guides this summer, and we'll continue to host ESL family nights, which are very well attended, and they give out bubbles and snacks, and bringing a sense of community to our families who may have newly arrived in Holmdel.
Do you know on that slide that you just had up, the breakout of the 50 or so students? Is it even between the 4 schools, or are you lopsided in a couple of different schools?
More in the younger grades. So as you go up each building, there's less.
Okay.
So Village has the most. Okay, moving on. We're just going to quickly look at our dynamic learning maps. The dynamic learning maps are given to students who have most significant disabilities, intellectual disabilities in math, ELA, and science. So rather than taking the NJSLA, they take the DLM for short. It's a relatively small number, about 14% of students participated in these assessments. And the way that students are scored is emerging, approaching the target, at target, and advanced. So when we look at our results, we can see that they are pretty scattered. They're unique to each student. It is a small sample size, but these students have unique accommodations, so their performance is unique as well. We're going to continue programming to support our students, utilizing unique programs such as Rethink, Vizzle, Teach Town, Project Read, and more phonics instruction and visualization and verbalizing strategies as well. Okay, finally, moving on to our AP exams. Right, so I don't have to report this, but I know it is of interest to the community, so we wanted to share this information as well. So our AP exams are given in May to all students in the high school who are enrolled in them. You're given a score between 1 and 5, whereas most the College Board, which is the people that give out the exam in addition to the SATs. They deem proficiency at a 3. However, that is whether or not that is accepted for college credit depends on the university. So for instance, some schools will only take a 4 or a 5 for students to receive credit. Other schools won't take AP exam credit at all. But in purpose of this presentation and talking about proficiency, we're looking at levels above a 3. So here's our breakdown of AP enrollment. So in 9th grade, 22% of our students are enrolled in advanced placement exams or advanced placement courses. In 10th grade, that's about 17% of students. In 11th grade, that's 46% of students. And in 12th grade, that is 62% of students. Here is the 5-year snapshot of AP performance. The top row is the number of AP students. The next row is the number of exams given. Then we have the percentage of an 11th and 12th graders that took at least one AP course. And finally, we have the number of students that had scores above a 3 in at least one content area. So as you can see, we grew from 318 AP students last year to 349 this year. We gave almost 100 more exams. Our participation of our 11th and 12th graders declined slightly from 57% to 54%. And the number of students with scores above a 3 rose from 249 to 280. Okay. Some of this now is just the high level snapshot of AP performance, beginning with the percentage of total AP students with a score of 3+. So for instance, we're happy to see that although AP participation is growing, 45.6% of students took and scored at least a 3 on the exams. As you can see, we grew our program about 30 to 40%. And I think it's just philosophy of thought. Do you want to keep our program small and really high performing, or do you want to expand it to more students? And whenever you expand it, your proficiency may decline slightly, but it's not significant, about 1.5 percentage points. Okay, moving on. Now we see the score distribution of all tests. So if anyone is interested in what this looks per content area or per test, I do have that information. But for the overall snapshot highlight, of all AP exams that were administered last year, 13% of students had a 1, 18% a 2, 26% 3, 25% 4, and 19% 5. Okay. Finally, this graph over here is our mean comparison performance, Holmdel versus the state. So in blue are the lines that are in blue is our local data, which is Holmdel performance, and in green is the state average. So you can see from this chart, some areas were above the state and other areas were below. I believe it is about 12 subject areas we scored above the state. So we're going to continue to working on bridging those gaps. In addition, of the 27 different tests that are administered, the district outperformed, like I said, in 12 areas, including art history, biology, chemistry, computer science, research, language and composition, Italian, psychology, statistics, US history, and world history. This slide is very exciting. Every fall, the AP program through College Board recognizes high school students who have demonstrated outstanding college level achievement while they're still in high school on multiple AP exams. So there's 3 levels of awards, and you could read the description right there. How winners are determined. It's the student's AP exam score is calculated based on all exams taken, including this year and previous years. And then the student's AP exam scores are checked to see which ones count towards the various scholar distinctions. So we're delighted to announce that 119 students in total were recognized as AP scholars in 2023 with an average score of 3.61 across all assessments. So kudos to all of you. And as a summary of findings, US News World Report recently released the score sheet of where our high school stacks up in comparison to all high schools across the state. A lot of the metrics for these scorecards, as I discussed in my testing for credit exam, is derived based on AP performance. So you can see here, as we increase AP, for instance, from 57 to 59, so do our scores. We went from the 68 number ranking to 64. And I know we've got a lot of work to do, but any movement up to me is a win. In addition, our percentage of students taking at least one exam increased, and we're working on how do we maintain that level of proficiency while we expand our program. If anyone recalls from Dr. Cascone's previous presentation, one of our performance goals this year, our district goal, is really about increasing AP enrollment because it's giving all students that chance to have that college experience while still in high school, earn credits, and hopefully save their parents some money. So overall programming recommendations are pretty consistent with what I've discussed previously. We want to increase percentage of AP students at all levels, not only to improve state rankings, but to give them that college level experience. We want to continue to research the impetus for AP enrollment and participation. For instance, are students taking the courses because of the GPA boost or the reimbursement? And we will adjust and determine our practices accordingly after we get information from a few years of data. We've purchased Albert.io, which is an AP preparation platform. And our content supervisors have already began unpacking and analyzing the instructional planning reports provided by College Board to support our teachers in each content area. What are the specific skills students need to work on? So identifying trends are going to help us as we improve our overall instructional practice. We're looking to continue to enroll new teachers into AP Summer Institute. So for anyone that doesn't know, anytime a teacher teaches AP, we send them off to a week training, whether that's at Rutgers or Fairleigh Dickinson or Madison, so that they're developing a syllabus with AP professors who can vet our program, make sure it's solid, and they can learn those good skills and practices from others. In addition, we're working on increasing AP proficiency and increasing participation. And we're thinking of conducting an AP fair in the spring to highlight course offerings because we know this is a great opportunity for students. Okay, so my final slide is SAT data. It doesn't relate to AP, but I just know this is something that is of interest. So this is cohort data by each class. So beginning with the class of 2018, it's 6 years of data. So we see class of 2023, our most recent cohort, is all the way to the right. So we've hovered every single year, it's been over the 1200 mark. Drops in performance this year were more relevant to evidence-based reading and writing. So if you look at the yellow bar, yellow is reading and writing, and green is math. So we went from 607 in reading and writing to 600 in ELA or reading and writing this year. What is pretty interesting about the way that the SAT is currently set up is there's 5 reading passages. Only 1 is fiction. 4 of them are informational texts, with being scientific texts or historical texts. So it's really a team effort as we think about how do we improve SAT performance. It's not just our English teachers, it's our social studies teachers, it's our science teachers, because regardless of the type of content area it is, we can all do that technical reading and writing. It's also worth sharing that the SAT, the way that it is structured, is different beginning in 2024. So it's going to move to an all digital based platform. And the testing time is also reduced from about 3.5 hours to 2.5 hours. And to close out, behind every child, there is a score. Behind every score, there is a child. I'm sorry, it's hot in here. We're so proud of our students. They're showing phenomenal work, overcoming obstacles. Even where we decline, we always pick ourselves back up. So this is a great place to work. Thank you for having me.
First off, thanks for all your efforts. I think you've been here now a year, so this is good. Obviously, you have a ton of history behind you now, obviously being here for the full year. No, but I appreciate it. I know you're a big data person, so this is great to see. I'll have a few comments and then I'll open up to the rest of the board so we have if there's a little dialogue. Just starting with English language arts, I think that's probably an easier one. That's a solid increase, good progress, significantly ahead of the state. I think that's historically, as long as I've been up here on the board, that's been almost that's been the case. Math, I always looked at, okay, as long as I've been here, guidance in math always seems to be an issue. And I know we're working on it. And I know, we have a new math supervisor, which I think is a great step. I know sitting up here on behalf of the board, the one thing I always say is, hey, for next time, for the committee of the whole, maybe next week or in a couple of weeks, can we have an analysis of the current 8th grades, like how are we separated? Are our class, do we need to reduce class sizes? Do we need to add teachers? Like I look at like this, I know our budget's bad, but we still have to do work. We still have to do things that are right for the kids. So I look at all that, like, I know my kids went through math 8 and I know the breakouts where you take honors math and regular math. And it looks like a lot of those kids that are getting waved in, we might have to take a little stronger look at it because it looks like they might be struggling a little bit based on the numbers you show. So I think that's definitely maybe a hard story to tell, but one we're going to have to, sometimes you got to take your medicine sometimes, saying if the kids aren't ready for it.
Right. And Pete, what I would just say to that point is algebra truly is the linchpin to higher math. You can't do calculus. You can't do advanced statistics without an understanding of algebra. So if our kids need more time in algebra, there's no harm in taking it in 9th grade. I just want to let students know, if you want to take it in 9th grade, you're still going to end up okay. You could still end up taking pre-calculus, Calc AB. I took algebra as a freshman. I ended up taking Calc AB, Calc AB when I was in high school. So it's okay to start slow. We're going to all end up where we need to go.
No, that's fair. And I remember a few years ago, besides the class sizes, is there a way we could look into, like, of all those kids, how many are getting tutors? How many are not? Because, it'd just be interesting to see, like, okay, they're getting tutors and they're still struggling. Like, where's the breakdown happening? And then, like, I remember years ago, the National Honor Society kids, Jack and Anuga down here and their cohorts, they used to push into national. They used to push in and do extra help. Like Mr. Logren, I don't know if we still do that, but that would definitely be like, hey, give these kids the extra help if they need it, besides just the teachers, because then you could do one-on-one and it's coming from essentially a peer, 11th grader, 10th grader that just went through it and knows where the potholes are and things.
I love that idea. And I think getting the two schools on the same schedule would be really pivotal in making that happen, because we know when our students would be able to offer support. So
and they
guys are up for it.
Yeah. And they need the volunteer hours, things like that. And I remember when my older son, when he was in 8th grade, that was offered. And there's some tough little parts of the math here that, these kids can definitely help there. Thank you for the science. I get it. I always wonder is the test just too hard around the state, where everyone's sort of struggling. Happy in math, like we were saying, like we're ahead of the state averages. But I think if there's one thing next time, like we get some analysis of further just dig deeper into that.
Data is supposed to be released October 9th. So I should have that before the next committee of the whole. And I think it'll round out our conversation as we revisit waivers, and just looking at the data simultaneously will help us.
And I think the AP results, I know a couple of years ago, that was a board goal. Mm-hmm. And I know we did things like, from GPA boosting to paying for the tests and a bunch of other things. So obviously we could see the results and we can see them in the News and World Reports and niche ratings and all the different ratings that we see where we're going in the right direction. So that's a positive. I know one thing of speaking of a kid who recently graduated, some of those 1s or 2s, a lot of times those kids are getting those because the test means nothing to them. Mm-hmm. So they're literally sitting for the test and just mailing it in. So that's definitely dragging down some of your rates, because 69% are getting a 3 or higher is really good, considering that a lot of other kids going, I'm not getting credit for this at my college. So it's,
and I think that's true, especially if students know the university they're going to isn't going to accept it.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
And then thank you for the SAT stuff. I always look at it for the audience that's here. Last year of the graduating class, all but 7 are in college. So you have, the entire graduating class is in college this year. And to me, that's always the SAT score, and that's, to me, like raw data. So thank you.
Most important data.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any board members?
I have some comments. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Irwin, for the presentation and data. Just some comments here. I know earlier in the year, we identified that the math 6th, 7th, and 8th was that area that was and we were going to be focused on that. I look forward to hearing more at the committee of the whole meeting, some of the initiatives that we're going to be possibly undertaking to enhance our students' curriculum or whatever they'll be doing in math, which will hopefully correlate into higher scores. I also wanted to express that I'm excited by the recent hire of Ms. Lauder, who is the supervisor of mathematics for the district, that will be hyper-focused on strategy and leading this initiatives, because this is really a focus area that we want to see improve significantly. And I'm confident with all the hard work with the team that we will get better in these areas. And it's great to see that the AP exams continue to increase. I know that was a huge initiative that the past board put into play, so it's working. Thank you for tonight's presentation.
You got it. Thank you.
Just a quick question as it relates to not specifically the data. You love data. Very impressive. But you mentioned that the change in the schedule led to a decrease in math minutes from 500 to 200.
So I can't speak to causality, because there's obviously it's causation. I don't know if that's the only factor, but when we're talking about performance declines, like it's almost 30%. We also know that we went from students having more time in math to less time in math. And to me, when we're considering our variables, that would be one of the first stops I would look at. And especially as we're presented with the opportunity this year to take a hard and critical look at our building schedules. And I know a primary focus of that is, with busing and the high school start times, but I think it's a chance to really look at stats as well and see how do we maximize instructional time in the content areas. I know Ms. Tassilo, you're right there with me on that one. So yeah.
So I just look forward to seeing it all. You and I have had multiple conversations about math over your first year here. And I look forward to not only, with the new math supervisor really focusing in on that and under your, direction, really focusing in, but looking at the waivers, maybe looking at the schedule so that they aren't dropping math every other day. Just all of it coming together and where we can, head, I really see nothing but promise in the future, for that. So
me too. It's an exciting year.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I would also like to say that I think that one data point that is more a subjective data point that I would love to see come through is at the high school level, looking at getting some student feedback. Definitely. On how they think the courses went. I mean, I know that we've talked about student report, like a student survey for like exiting seniors, but I mean, like the kids that are currently in the thick of it, saying, and like asking them about their experience with the different, courses. Like, so my nephew, Jack, and maybe Anuga, I'm not sure like on what track you're at, but I mean, Jack, what are you in right now? Pre-calc?
BC.
So, right. So like he was, you were super math. Yes. He was super math, but proud to say that he took his SATs. So can't wait to see that data next year at this time because he scored 770 math, 770 English first try. So super proud.
Wow. You can do the next presentation.
So super proud of him, but so kids from that track to just your everyday, my first son was your average Algebra 1 as a freshman. And we, so in both all the different tracks and just getting their feedback on, and maybe that's where we get the data for, did you have outside tutoring? Yeah. Did you go to extra help? So we can kind of see maybe there's a pattern, there that can help us for making the math program stronger for next year.
So I think that's very important. As you can see, we have about 55% of our students are enrolled in AP, but I need to understand the 45% that are not enrolling why. And surveying the students is going to glean us that information because I am a firm believer. Pete just said it. Only all but 7 students graduated or going on to colleges and universities next year. What I mean to say is I really do believe that everybody can take and pass at least one AP exam throughout their high school career. So if they're not enrolling, I want to find out why. What are the hesitancies? And let's do something about it because they have tremendous potential.
All right. Thank you very much. And I guess we'll talk further at the next committee of the whole meeting.
You got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. That brings us to the report of our student representatives. So I'm not sure if our senior or our junior will go first.
I'll start. Hi, everyone. With the school year in full swing, students have started to settle in. We recently had back to school night at the high school on Monday of last week. This Friday, the seniors will be selling neon items during lunch, after school, and during Friday night's football game, which also happens to be senior night. Be sure to stop by the Commons to pick up some fun items for the game. Also, senior merch is out. You can visit the senior store by scanning the QR code on the TVs in the hallways or the links on Google Classroom. Orders can be made for both seniors and their families today. In addition to senior apparel, we also have a new school-wide store with profits being split between all 4 classes. Moving on, in these next couple of weeks, the Student Advisory Board will be reviewing clubs for approval. So anyone that is interested in creating their own club can fill out the form in the daily announcements and proceed from there. Something else that can be found in the daily announcements is a sign up and link for the Holmdel High School Red Bank Crop Walk team, where you could donate to the cause and join us for the walk on Sunday, October 15th. Thank you. And I will now pass the student report on to Jack.
Thank you, Anuga. Tickets for the Harvest Homecoming are now available. Students can visit their student council representatives to purchase tickets. Homecoming will be held in the new gym on October 19th from 7 to 9 p.m. Tickets will be available until October 17th, so buy them while you can. The club fair will be held on Friday, October 6th during unit lunch. The fair will give students an opportunity to learn about the diverse clubs we have here at Holmdel High School. All clubs are invited to participate and can reach out to their SAB liaison with any questions. Finally, Powder Puff is almost here. The junior girls and senior girls will battle it out in a flag football game. We are also bringing back the opportunity for the boys to cheer on the girls for the game and during halftime. The game is scheduled to be played on Bob Rogge Field on Tuesday, November 7th at 3 p.m. If you're a junior or senior interested in participating, please check your email for more details. This concludes the student report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Anuga. Good job on your first report, Jack. You didn't say the football game for the football team is on Friday, and the football team is 4-0. It's the first time they've been 4-0 in a long time. So if you want to come out to see them on Friday, that'd be pretty cool. And, field hockey is doing excellent. I know the boys are beating Wall 3-1 or 4-1 just now. So good job to the AD if he's out here somewhere. I know Dr. Kokoda in the back there. So well done so far. Thanks for your reports, guys. And brings us to any questions for our students? And hopefully, Anuga, you told Jack when he's allowed to leave and all that good stuff, so he's not here till 10 or 11 o'clock, and he's got a lot of big tests and classes, I know. All right, I see no questions. Brings us to the report of the superintendent, Dr. Cascone.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just starting off with the standard procedure here on the enrollment numbers. Village School, 808 students. Indian Hill, 624. Sat School, 492. High School, 966 students for a total of 2,890. And that is down 30 students from the same time last year. So good evening, board members, esteemed community. I trust this finds you all in good health and high spirits. I would like to take this opportunity to share some key highlights and developments from our district over the past month. It is with great pride that I report on our collective efforts to foster a positive and inclusive learning environment. Live Holmdel Blue. Our district's Live Holmdel Blue program has continued to gain momentum, emphasizing the importance of positive behavior, respect, responsibility, kindness, and citizenship within our school community. This initiative is a testament to our shared commitment to nurturing a supportive environment that fosters personal growth and social development. A National Suicide Awareness Month is September, and as we recognize this month, we are reminded of the significance of promoting mental health and well-being. Our district remains dedicated to providing resources, support, and education to address this critical issue and ensure the welfare of our students. Week of Respect. Next week, we will celebrate the Week of Respect within our schools. This annual observance underscores our commitment to cultivating a respectful and inclusive atmosphere where every member of our school community is valued and honored. Student athletes, Mr. Reddy mentioned something about it, but our student athletes have once again demonstrated their dedication, perseverance, and talent. We celebrate their outstanding achievements on and off the field, recognizing the discipline and teamwork that they exemplify in representing our district. As I always do, have had an opportunity to get out to a number of events. I try and get out to at least one of every game, regardless of level. And represents one of my favorite things to do. Also gives me an opportunity to interact with our parents and guardians, which is always an enjoyable experience for me. And thank you all for always making me feel so welcome. Back to school nights. So our recently held back to school nights were met with an overwhelmingly positive response from our parents and guardians. The robust attendance and active participation demonstrated the strong partnership between our schools and families. And these events are instrumental in fostering open lines of communication and reinforcing our shared educational goals. Strategic plan progress. Our ongoing efforts in advancing our strategic plan remain a priority. This comprehensive roadmap for our district's future continues to guide our decision-making and shape our educational priorities. We are committed to the continual evaluation and refinement of our goals. Along the same lines, a parent survey on communication practices will be launched in the near future to gather valuable feedback on our communication practices. This survey will help us better understand your preferences and expectations, enabling us to enhance our communication efforts and keep you informed effectively as pursuant to one of the goals in our strategic plan. I would like to acknowledge our school parent groups, extend my heartfelt gratitude to them for their unwavering support and dedication. Their efforts in organizing welcome back luncheons for our staff and events like the recent Fall Fest at Village underscore their commitment to our school community's well-being. And in conclusion, I would like to emphasize that these achievements and initiatives are a collective endeavor made possible by the tireless dedication of our staff, the involvement of our parents and guardians, and the hard work of our students. As we continue to work together to enhance the educational experience of our children, I'm confident that we will achieve even greater success in the future. And so I thank you to the board and our community for your attention. I look forward to our continued collaboration as we strive to make Holmdel School District the best it can be. And that, Mr. President, is my report.
Thank you, Dr. Cascone. Any comments?
I'd like to make an
for
acknowledgement because you brought up
Sure.
the Suicide Awareness Month. So thank you to Terrence Wall for hosting a panel over at Bell Works, and I appreciate that Mr. Howard and Miss Rizzitello, Miss Lamaglia, and Mr. Cohen were in attendance to that panel. It was extremely informative. If you can get the link for the YouTube to watch that, I think it was a great watch for everybody. What I took away from it is really having that family structure, family, friends, and parents playing a pivotal role for really anybody's life, to be there for them in these most sensitive times and moments. So I was really appreciative to learn that and see that. And I think we should note to the community, because I wasn't aware of this, that dial 988 if you or someone you know is having a mental health challenge, and please do reach out and help. One of the comments that came up from one of the speakers, a 29-year-old male, was, men are too macho. We think men are too macho to have mental health problems, and that's not true. That's a false statement, and we do need to get rid of that stigma. So, don't be embarrassed. You're not alone, and please reach out for help. Thank you for all those that participated from the Holmdel School District. I was certainly proud to see you up there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Damari. And if I can briefly follow on with that, 988 is essentially the new 911 for mental health. We, during the audience at Bell Works, and kudos to Ralph Zucker for reimagining the fantastic 2 million square foot facility there. The meeting was dedicated to Pierce Jark. His mother, Lori, was there. They lost their son to suicide 6 years ago. Star lacrosse player, 16 years old. Beautiful young man, funny, aggressive in lacrosse, loved the sport, full of life. It was dedicated to him and the memory of all the families who suffer through this tragedy, which knows no demographic, knows no income range, no background. It touches every single family in this country. And if you want a statistic that will sober you walking out this door, if you don't know it already, from the ages of 10 to 24, 10-year-old boys, 10-year-old girls to 24, the second leading cause of death is suicide. Second, number two. So mental health is critical. Almost every hand raised in the Bell Works that morning when asked if they were familiar with, if they were not familiar with 988. So if you or someone you know or family member is in a crisis, 988. There are tremendous resources. And for folks that are suffering, you are loved. Your family loves you. There is help. And it's an us and a we and together issue that's able to be tackled together. Use those resources. Speak to your family. They love you and they want to hear from you. And you can work through the dynamics that are impacting you. And there are tremendous resources. So thanks again. And it's 988. And thank you, Mr. Howard. Thank you so much, and the staff for participating and sharing the certifications and the training. I believe it was 19 hours approximately of training done in this school for our educators, and for the folks, the NJEA, the educators that are participating in crisis awareness and suicide awareness. I am 100% convinced from that event yesterday morning that we don't know where, but with the ripples in the pond in life, that someone's life will be saved. 100% convinced, and power to the Jark family and all the families that are reaching out to help save lives. It's very, very important. Thank you very much, Mr. Dewey, for bringing that up.
Thank you, Terrence. Couldn't have said it better. Absolutely. The worst nightmare anyone can have. So appreciate you doing that. All right. That'll bring us to questions or comments from the public on action items only.
Mr. Reddy,
yes,
just the HIB report.
Oh yeah, you forgot that, didn't you?
Okay,
we'll take it.
So just, simply that I submit into the record the report as presented to the board in closed executive session.
Thank you, sir. Brings us to questions or comments from the public on action items only. So here's the ask. A lot of people were here last week. So my first ask will be that, okay, we're going to have Holmdel residents speak first. And then after that, if there's people from other towns that would like to speak, and we are going to stay to the 3 minutes today. So if you have Moby Dick or another long passage, that's not happening tonight. So in about 2.5 minutes, I might raise my hand or we'll cough into the microphone. So, organize your thoughts and have it succinct. And please feel free to come to the microphone, your name, address, and we'll go from there.
Good evening, Barbara Garrity, 24 Stony Brook Road, Holmdel. This is a very complicated subject, this particular policy, but I had two thoughts that I wanted to share. And one is I know that I am aware that some other districts have abolished this policy and are now involved in lawsuits over that. And so I would hate to see the resources of our district directed away from student education towards defending against lawsuits. And my second reaction to the proposal to get rid of this policy is that we don't live in a perfect world, and not all families are perfect families. And as much as we parents want to know everything about our children, I do think on a subject as difficult as this, where I think there is suicide risk involved, I don't think that the presumption should be made that parents should be told if a child does not feel it is safe for them to do so. So that's really the heart of my concern about abolishing this and requiring that parents be informed if a child is struggling with their sexuality. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Good to see you, by the way.
Good evening. My name is Riham Taha. I live at 6 Stevens Drive. We're here tonight discussing whether or not policy 5756 has a place here in our community. I firmly believe that it does not. This policy tricked its way into our district. And now that we have learned that this policy was merely a guidance and not mandatory, I hope the board members tonight will make the necessary and clear decision of rescinding it. We are a community of involved, invested parents who have always worked greatly together with school staff and faculty members for the betterment of our children. We love our kids unconditionally and would do anything to support them through all their challenges. We don't need a policy in our district that will take away parental discretion, that can potentially hinder the line of communications we have with our teachers. We don't need a policy that promotes secrecy and one that denies parents of knowing crucial information regarding their own children's identity and putting that pressure on staff to carry that burden. And we certainly don't need a policy in our community that allows for external third-party advocacy groups to influence our children's decisions. We are the legal guardians to our kids until they are 18. We have that God-given right to raise them, protect them, and help guide them through their growing years, especially when they're facing challenges and difficulties. Parental rights should never have to be up for debate. It's just common sense. I thank you all, board members, for your time, and I hope that you will vote tonight to rescind this policy. Now that we know better, we must do better. Thank you.
Anthony Lebecci, 6 Crepe Myrtle Drive. Before I begin, I wanted to just thank Dr. Irwin for her report. What a great statistic to know that the average is 1,200 on the SAT in the school system. That's amazing. And I'm really looking forward to being a part of that and making that become 1,300 and 1,400 in the future. So, but thank you for that, Dr. Irwin. That's really enlightening. And what a testament to our teachers that really is. So I want to commend the board for addressing and putting the 5756 issue on the agenda tonight. You know, as candidates for the Board of Ed, myself, Allison Lepresti, and Riham Taha, you know, we want to clarify that we're obviously against this policy. Now, should it be repealed tonight, we need to be cognizant that this was really just the start. This is the start of a step in the right direction against our state government making decisions about our children's health and well-being. Okay, there will be more to come. They will keep doing this. So we need to be resolved. We must be prepared to stand for our parents, stand for our rights as parents, and I implore you to make the right decision tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Lauren McGrail. I live at 40A Main Street in the parsonage next to the church I serve, which is Holmdel Community United Church of Christ. I'm speaking out this evening on behalf of my congregation and our collective commitment to God's call for inclusive love and justice for all. On behalf of my congregation, many of whom have attended and spoken already at local BOE meetings, I wish to make clear where our congregation stands with regard to this new proposal to rescind and abolish Policy 5756, a non-binding policy created to help districts to counsel students who are gender non-conforming or identify as transgender. We believe this repeal is a new effort to undermine the rights of the LGBTQ+ community and its youth, especially trans youth, in the guise of protecting parental rights. We believe it is not only fraught with legal problems, but is a travesty of injustice for trans youth. As a church that has voted to be an open and affirming church and flies the pride flag, we have come here tonight to stand with our LGBTQ+ siblings, parents, and grandparents against this latest attack on their rights. We have come here to stand up, not only for their safety and protection, but for their right to have their gender identities affirmed. Let me be clear. We stand against any amendments or change to the existing state policy 5756, and we're absolutely against rescinding or abolishing this important safeguard for our children and the teachers and administrators who are charged with teaching and counseling them. Our faith tells us that Jesus accepts us for who we are and that we are all made in God's image. Our children and grandchildren deserve to live their lives safely. We will not condone this action, nor will we be silent. We ask that each board member tonight consult your conscience and cast a vote that reflects the simple but poignant truth that all children deserve to be treated with dignity and have rights for protection and safety.
Allison Lopresti, 49 Ladwood Drive. First, we want to applaud the board for taking action and voting on policy 5756 tonight. Just want to reiterate that Holmdel is an inclusive, accepting, and respectful community. We're a community of parents who are engaged and involved in our children's lives. Policy 5756 puts undue burdens on administration, staff, and teachers. Teachers especially should be focusing on teaching. The guidelines in policy 5756 have no impact on how Holmdel currently handles children questioning their gender identity.
As stated in last week's meeting, Holmdel always tries to bridge the gap between parents and children in these scenarios. If policy 5756 is rescinded, it will be business as usual in the district. Parents are fighting for the right to be informed. Do the right thing. Vote now to rescind policy 5756.
My name is Jennifer Terranova, 8 Crescent Road. I grew up in Holmdel. My family moved here in 1992, and I graduated high school in 2008. I moved back to Holmdel in 2020 with my husband and my young son. My husband and I expressly moved here because of the high caliber of Holmdel schools. I love this town very much. That being said, I'm also aware it isn't perfect. Anti-LGBT bullying has taken place in Holmdel. I was in the stairwell directly after someone had a bottle of urine thrown on them in 2005 for being LGBT. I was wearing these chunky flat-form shoes because fashion wasn't the best back then, and I slipped in the urine halfway down the landing and fell. I remember it like it was yesterday. That was that student's last day in Holmdel schools. They transferred out, and Lambda successfully sued the school on their behalf. In the lawsuit, it was disclosed they also used to have to go outside the school and go around that way because the bullying was so severe in the halls. Wadington versus the Holmdel Township Board of Education was a landmark case. That very first lawsuit under the New Jersey's law against discrimination to successfully challenge anti-gay discrimination in a public school. That took place in Holmdel. I remember bullying by staff members and students, encouraged by some staff, of Ms. Cancolosi and Ms. Schweider. Ms. Cancolosi was the athletics director in Holmdel, and Ms. Schweider was the former principal. I remember them being called dykes, and a vicious rumor went around that they were caught having sex in the girls' locker room during school hours. Cancolosi successfully sued the district over the discrimination she received for over $800,000. Far more details than what I personally witnessed or remembered are disclosed in court documents online. The harassment was quite extensive. I was the recipient of bullying because of my bisexuality. It was a contributing factor for why I chose to do dual enrollment, so that I could only have to be in Holmdel High School for English, gym, and an elective. Former friends stopped letting me eat with them at lunch, so I ate alone in the library. When I graduated in 2008, I was in a wheelchair, and someone threatened before coming that they would push my wheelchair down the stairs at graduation. They did not. Despite all this, I loved Holmdel so much that I came back. I thought, the world is a different place now. People don't care so much about sexual orientation or gender identity. People are more accepting than they were a long time ago. Policies like 5756, which went into place 8 years ago, make me feel like my son will be safer at Holmdel, no matter what he identifies as when he's older. That the board is even considering overturning 5756 makes me physically nauseous from worry that history will repeat itself. To characterize policy 5756 as one requiring educators to lie and keep secrets from parents is deliberate mistruth. The actual aim of the policy is, quote, to help schools and district administrators take steps to create an inclusive environment in which transgender and gender nonconforming students feel safe and supported, and to ensure that each school provides equal educational opportunities for all students in compliance with NJAC 6A7-1.1. We cannot be an inclusive district if we do not include our LGBT youth and make sure they have a learning environment in which they feel safe. We want the same thing. I know in my heart we do. You all love Holmdel schools as well, and education. We want an environment in which children feel they are safe to be themselves, and thanks to the safety, they can thrive in their studies. You quoted suicide rates. So I did some quick Googling, and lesbian and gay youths living in counties with fewer school districts with inclusive anti-bullying policies are at a 2.25 risk, more likely to have attempted suicide in the past year compared to those living in counties where more districts had these policies. Inclusive anti-bullying policies are significantly associated with a reduced risk for suicide attempts among lesbian and gay youths, even after controlling for socioeconomic characteristics. In policy 5756, part E, the prohibition of discrimination states that the board will take reasonable measures to accommodate the needs of transgender students in accordance with federal and state guidelines. Part N explicitly addresses harassment, intimidation, and bullying to make sure it does not happen. Part F of the policy addresses privacy of students and that their personal information will not be disclosed by the school unless the child's safety and well-being is in question. It provides outlines for these exceptions. If a child is not afraid of their parents, and if there is an open and involved dynamic, the parents will already know about their child's orientation and identity. It will not be a secret. If the child does not have that kind of relationship with their parents, the school's job is to educate, not play family therapist. As per Part D of Policy 5756, parents may have direct involvement in coming up with a plan with educators in which their child can be better supported and address student needs. 5756 does not include parents. It protects students. Educators want to provide every student with an accurate and quality education, while some politicians want to exclude kids, denying their school's funding and writing people to who look like them out of history books. This is a politicized movement to get rid of Policy 5756 all of a sudden. There are no instances here where it has caused any harm.
Can I ask you to just wrap it up in the next 20 seconds? We're way over 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Karen Strickland, 26 Hayward Hills Drive. And I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Monmouth County. The League of Women Voters has a long history of advocating for the rights, health, and education of children, defending our democracy and ending discrimination against the LGBTQ+ community go hand in hand. The League is gravely concerned with proposed policy changes that put students' safety and mental health at risk and violate New Jersey's law against discrimination. Public schools are a cornerstone of democracy, and New Jersey should strive to ensure our schools are safe, inclusive, and welcoming for all. Proposals like repealing this policy are causing extreme political polarization and are manufactured to divide our communities and increase distrust in public education and civic engagement. Outing children puts them at risk for bullying, we just heard, harassment, and discrimination. It makes them more vulnerable to self-harm and suicide, which you just told us earlier. Despite arguments otherwise, numerous studies and data show that forced outing to parents is harmful, not helpful to LGBTQ+ youth. Here's the bottom line. If a child is not sharing information about their sexuality or gender identity with their caregivers, those grown-ups should be concentrating on the environment they are fostering within the four walls of their own home, instead of attacking and blaming the school where the child might feel safer. It is important to note that this proposal to repeal is not a standalone policy, but part of a concentrated effort to undermine public education. In addition to attacks on LGBTQ+ student rights, the campaign includes book bans, attacks on sexual education, and attempts to rewrite American history by prohibiting accurate and necessary conversations about race and equity. The League of Women Voters cannot stand by while a small minority uses our classrooms as political battlegrounds at the expense of our students and our country's future. This proposal to repeal is also an attack on our public school educators and has served to drive highly trained, experienced teachers out of the field. It is time to say no to these attacks, time to support our educators and stand up for children. The League of Women Voters urges the Board of Education to reject the proposed repeal of Policy 5756 under consideration tonight. Thank you.
So, Board President, I have a brief point of order because we'll have a number of speakers and I think that's wonderful. But one thing that's sad to me is when students and children, and I apologize that there are things that you're going to hear tonight that are grossly misrepresenting the facts and also placing fear in your hearts where it does not belong. I think it's really important. As an example, the Asbury Park Press today states Holmdel to vote on dropping transgender student protections. Now, if I'm a transgender student, I find that very frightening. You should feel very comfortable that that is fake. That is a false headline. Now, the story itself was reasonable, and so it's not the writer's fault, but the headline was fake and deliberate to misrepresent the policy, which is not a state policy that was represented earlier, from 2019, which was not 8 years earlier. But I think it's really important that the folks know what laws are on the books, remain on the books, that transcend this policy that was drafted by a small company in Toms River stating it was mandatory when in fact that was a lie and was never mandatory at all. I just want, for the folks that are here and some that may have to leave earlier, they understand the law against discrimination intact. They understand civil rights intact, because what I've heard so far is so galling and so frustrating. And for a child to hear that from an adult, you're trusting them implicitly. I want the children to know that you're absolutely protected, that the laws are in place, and you're 100%. Excuse me. I understand that, but I just point of order. I think the law is important, so people have the facts, and then they could judge. And then they could judge.
Please.
And then they can judge themselves. I think it's important.
Thank you, Terrence. Please, Ms. Singer.
Barbara Singer, 5 Deerfield Road. One thing we agree on, Mr. Wall, is there's been a lot of misinformation here tonight. Not as much as we heard the last meeting, but the speakers aren't done yet. I'm especially dismayed to hear somebody running for the board to say that this policy is promoting secrecy. It's not promoting secrecy. There's nothing you can read in there that say that that's what it's promoting. And as we were told last week, if this policy is removed, nothing changes. So then that allegation just means that schools have always promoted secrecy. So the comment is nonsensical. We had comments about not bringing politics into this yet last week, Mr. Wall. All I heard from you was possibly maybe a Marxist Trenton, maybe Marxist. I don't even know what you said in between, because that was just shocking when we're trying not to bring politics into our Board of Ed. And then tonight we have another candidate for Board of Ed saying this is a step against our state government in promoting its repeal. So you want to repeal it because you have a beef with the state government and you're running for a Board of Ed, a non-political Board of Ed. That's two things. So then we're hearing tonight, and I've learned since last week, that this policy is not out of the current government in Trenton. It was came about under Governor Christie. And it came about because of needs to further put in writing protections specifically for trans kids. Because one of my questions with all this was like, why are we focused on trans kids, not LGBT community as a whole? And I come to learn because this population is at a higher rate for suicide and for not getting support at home. Probably where the rest of the LGBT community was 30, 40 years ago. So with that, I think we need to understand that we've had administrations on both sides of the aisle dealing with the reality of what the trans community has to deal with in this policy. While there may be certain other general things in the HIB law and non-discrimination, this policy really was put there to give specific guidance to the schools in steps they should take to try to help this population that we have. So I'd really like to know, if nothing changes, if it's repealed, why all this focus on repealing it? Nobody seemed to specify that last week. Yet people on both sides tonight have already said that their understanding from last week's meeting is that nothing substantively will change at the school. So regardless of how the policy got here, it does at the end of the day, without there being some factual basis for removing it, it does appear that it is just a political ploy that's going on. Probably what the League of Women Voters was saying, makes sense. Thank you.
Good evening, board members. Robert Way, 7 Cathy Court. Any policy that is allowed to stand whose one of its major tenets is don't tell the parents is a policy that both Marks and Engels will be proud of. Regardless of the fact that the current policy addresses mainly the transgender community. It just happens to be the one issue that's attached to this don't tell the parents issue. One of the tenets of Marxism, and this is not getting political, this is just reality, this is history. And if you ignore history, it happens over and over again, is the destruction of the traditional patriarchal family. A policy that is allowed to stand, whose major tenet is don't tell the parents, drives a wedge between the children and the parents. This was tried in Hungary after Marx and Engels came out. Their commissioner of education instituted sexual education that promoted free love and promiscuity. Sounds familiar to what we're dealing with today in our sexual education. The rescinding of this policy and anyone that supports the rescinding of this policy does not support the discrimination of the transgender community. Quite the opposite. Anybody that supports the rescinding of this policy also supports that all safeguards be kept in place that have always been in place for any minority group to be included, protected, not be discriminated against, not to be bullied, all of those same protections in place. The main issue I have is don't tell the parents. And a policy that presumes that there's a problem at home with zero evidence, with the exception of the child in the school. We don't let our kids get their own medication without parental consent. If a child at school gets hurt, we get called. If a child at school asks for narcotics, the parents are informed. These kids can't even friggin' vote. They're going to make decisions about what their gender is at 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and that's going to be kept from them. Any policy that's allowed to stand for that is on the wrong side of the history, wrong side of history. And if you vote to keep it in place, you might as well raise your hand and say, I'm a Marxist, without even saying you're a Marxist, because that's what you are, because that's what it is. It's easy to look back in history, you see all the mistakes and what happened, because everything happens. Every chapter you read is a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades that go by. It's not as easy to see what's happening when it's happening in real time. And this is what's happening right now. It's destruction of the traditional family. It's a march towards Marxism. And if you can't see it, you shouldn't be sitting on that stage. That's all I have.
Any other comments? Please, ma'am.
I hope you'll allow me to speak. My name is Alice Hagan Dean, and I've been a resident of Holmdel for over 50 years, although I've moved in and out a bit. My mother is 90 years old and still lives in Holmdel on Ardmore Place. And my little sister just moved back home with 3 kids that are school age, and she's considering sending them to school. First, I want to thank you so much for your service to the board. I know this is not an easy time. And I advocate for repealing of policy 5756. There's no reason for this to exist since there are previous policies in place to prevent discrimination. It's my understanding that the problem with policy 5756 is that the state is not allowing changes to the policy, claiming that a change is discriminatory, albeit the policy is not mandatory. And that was declared on September 6th by the state attorney general. So I'm trying to get to the heart of the matter too. But I feel that not only should you repeal this policy, but take a look at what the state is asking. They are pushing an agenda that is harmful to all children. I was a tomboy, which by the way is normal. And still today, I was reading a recent article said about 50% of girls claim to be tomboys. But today there's a different narrative. I was a child who was active, climbed trees, caught frogs. I went shark's teeth hunting down at Ramison Way, and played with dinosaurs rather than dolls. And I put on a dress for school. I knew I was a girl, and society affirmed that I was a girl. Tragically today, society claims that children can be whatever they want, even if it goes against the law of nature. The decision of gender is already made. Why do we allow feelings and children to make the rules? Biology shows XX or XY chromosomes, and that's it. When a child determines they are not a boy or a girl and listens to lies that tell them something is wrong with them, and then they begin to transition, it can lead to puberty blockers, hormones, sterilization, and sadly removing healthy body parts to appease a false narrative that can never actually be attained. I started listening to Chloe Cole, who is a detransitioner, and her story broke my heart. To think that this was a child that adults allowed and misled this child to believe that she could change into a boy. She may be sterilized and never have children. She won't have that full ability, experience in marriage and of intimacy. And if she does have a child, she won't breastfeed. She says she was coerced into double mastectomy at 15 and now has the largest malpractice suit in the country. Sweden, Netherlands, and even England now are limiting the fast tracking of minors into affirmation surgery due to the overwhelming negative health consequences. So the opposing view claims that children are more likely to commit suicide if you notify parents of their pronouns and names. Studies are showing that suicide happens after transitioning. And there's some studies in Sweden that are showing this, that even up to 90% of people detransitioning are considering suicide, and a large amount are doing it. So there's no separation. When people are saying they're committing suicide, Chloe Cole says she had no suicide ideology before she transitioned. And there's another girl that's in a movie, that's a documentary. Her name is Yali Martinez, and she committed suicide at 19 after transitioning and realizing the pain of the puberty blockers and everything they go through that now they have to live with for the rest of their life. So
can I ask you to wrap it up, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
One more little point is that by the time children are 18 that have gender dysphoria, 11 studies in the Toronto 2021 study shows that 88% of children return to their birth gender. I just commend you for this, and I'm still proud to be from Holmdel. I got a 780 on my SATs in math, and I got a full scholarship to Michigan State University as a gymnast. So that's what the tomboy did for me. All right, thank you so much for your time.
Good afternoon, Board of Ed. My name is Mindy Kim Liu. I live in 9 Samuel Drive. I lived here for about 10 years. I too was a tomboy and still am. I think that's why I keep coming here. To voice my opinion, I grew up in Queens, New York. I also did very well in my SAT, but looking at Holmdel, I am so impressed. With Dr. Irwin, I think this is a kind of focus that all of us want to watch when we come here. I don't think we want to talk about sex education, sex orientation, book banning, those kind of things. I think we want to hear the scores, and it's unbelievable the kind of resources, the fact that AT teachers are sent to camp for 1 week to teach AP classes. I've never had that. This is why we all moved here, right? To make sure that our kids have the best opportunities to succeed. You know, I think I understand what the confusion is by the parents from the opposing side when they say, don't take my right away from my kids. Yeah, if you see a law that says, don't tell the parents, it's very surprising, as if like you want to keep their secrets. But I think they're misinformed, because the way it started is that the U.S. Constitution, New Jersey laws, common laws, it provides protection for the LGBTQIA plus kids. And the New Jersey law made one suggestion as a suggestion for schools to follow this in order to create a safe, comfortable place after consulting with the trans professionals as to how to decrease suicide. We talked about suicide September as a national awareness month. It would be a shame to repeal this policy in September. And you have said that, I'm sorry, what is that? Oh, okay. I thought there was timer. I was like, oh no, I ran out of time. Okay, so it's just a suggestion as to how to create a safe place so that a trans youth can come to learn. This will adhere to the state law, the common laws, to create a place where the trans youth can come and learn. This is not meant to keep things away from the parents. We know that, I was reading this article by the Sage journal, and it said that 80% of trans people thought about suicide, and 40% actually committed suicide. And about 50% had tried repeatedly to commit suicide. And this is, you know, the suicide doesn't happen because you turn into trans, but the microaggression, the lack of acceptance in society is what causes a trans youth to commit suicide. So for me, you know, Alison Lopresti, she said, we are inclusive, respecting, accepting community, but not at the expense of parents. And yet, you are the Board of Education. You have a legal and moral obligation to do what is in the best interest of our children. As board members, you are not to come in here and bring politics. I have to say that, Mr. Wall, you and
Mindy,
you talked about little boys.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I'll give you another 30 seconds, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
You and Mr. Mann has said little boys are little boys and little girls, and there's nothing in between. That itself is discriminatory statements against the trans youth, and that's a very thing that will lead us into lawsuit. So while you as board members are staying here and saying that, we ought to believe that this repealing of the policy is not discriminatory. Fine, repeal this policy, but then do something for the trans kid. Bring out the flag, bring out the welcome sign, and say, trans youth, we welcome you here because we know you live here. LGBTQIA community students, we know you live here. We support you, we welcome you. You will be protected if you go to our school. So let's bring out the flags tomorrow. Let's bring out the sign tomorrow. What's wrong with that, right? Because you support the trans youth kids. What bothers me is that you just talk about repealing this, but yet this law was there to protect them, the most vulnerable member of the society. We have heard a Holmdel person who grew up here and said she faced bullying.
Thank you, Mindy. Thank you.
You know, so let's do something for the trans kid. Let's support the kids.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. I'm Victor Lamantia from Lyndhurst, Bergen County. I am a gay male, and I'm speaking on behalf of Gays Against Groomers, a nonprofit organization. First, I want to say thank you, sir, for speaking early, though it was during the public comment session. You conveyed vital information. Let's just quickly review again the facts of policy 5756. First, it is not mandatory, but it is promoted as such. Second, it states parental consent is not required if a school accepts a student's asserted gender identity. And third, 5756 opens up a school to liability if a parent is not informed about a child and then the child harms him or herself. We're not here to discriminate against LGBT students. We have laws to protect them, such as the New Jersey law against discrimination. What is at issue here is parental rights. Parents should know who their children are. A few other districts adapted their policies to allow informing parents to be the rule and only make exception to this if there is evidence that informing parents would harm the child. And for daring to champion parental rights, these districts are being sued by the state attorney general. So if you repeal the policy, you have the right to do so. But if you change the policy, you will be sued by the state. 5756 says, due to a specific and compelling need, such as the health and safety of a student or an incident of bias-related crime, the school district may be obligated to disclose a student's status. So only when it's an emergency and not before? Most of the students are under 18 and therefore minors. Their brains are developing. They're figuring out who they are. Do we assume parents are too backward to deal with the child who might be struggling with gender identity? It is disgraceful that parents are being called haters and bigots for wanting to be informed about the well-being of their children, shouted down and interrupted for exercising their right to free speech in the time allotted. 5756 also states the school district shall allow a transgender student to use a restroom or locker room based on the student's gender identity. So no concern necessary for the comfort and safety of girls who are also a protected class? What if a biological boy claiming to be a girl uses the girl's bathroom? I think the parents might want to know about that too. Lastly, the policy says that social and emotional learning, or SEL, concepts should be incorporated into school culture and curricula. Some argue this is disguised Marxist ideology, indoctrinating students to see themselves as victims or oppressors. How about teaching students to be proactive and encouraging to be the best they can be, as we've always done? I advocate the board repeal 5756, not only to shield itself from liability, but also because by not informing parents, as one concerned parent pointed out, it prevents trans kids from getting the help they need. Thank you.
Yes, you can speak, please. I think we're
Just
far enough along. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacob Pender, Rutgers, New Brunswick. I just want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is those test scores. Those were fantastic. Just want to point that out. Let's just start off. To have an AP program expand like that in just a year and still have such a high percentage of students pass and get such good scores, only dropping a few percentage points. That was absolutely amazing. I enjoyed that presentation, but I am here to talk about policy 5756, unfortunately. And I really wanted to talk about what comes next. So if policy 5756 is repealed, what happens tomorrow? When a student comes in tomorrow and tells their teacher, I am using a different name, I'm using different pronouns, what happens? The current wording in policy 5756 prevents that teacher from telling the parents. According to New Jersey state law, that is still what the teacher would have to do. So why is that any different? What is repealing 5756? Will teachers start calling parents? Will they start telling parents these things? I think if we were repealing 5756 and we were just going based off of New Jersey law, I think we need new wording reflecting the laws of New Jersey in Holmdel to be passed before repealing 5756. If we do want to repeal this, that's fine. But what is in place? What happens if a transgender student wants to use the bathroom? Are they not going to be allowed to? Is there going to be some teacher? Is there going to be some staff member who is checking, who's looking at this child's genitals? How would we be checking this? Who would be doing this? If we repeal it today, when the students come into school tomorrow, what does that look like? What does that look like for them if we have no wording to replace the policy of 5756? Have there been open discussions with the parents? Have there been open discussions with the students, with the staff of the school to discuss this, discuss how, when they come in tomorrow, when they come in to do their work, when students come in to learn, how they're going to be affected by repealing this? I think these are all things that we need to consider going forward, and we need to table this discussion until there is a plan in place for that and put it to rest for now. And lastly, I'd just like to say that as of this year, Holmdel's amount of money that they get from the state increased 15% from 4 million to almost 5 million. So I know there's some board members who don't like to listen to people who are not from the town, but if you don't like to listen to us, then maybe consider returning that almost $5 million that you took from me and from all the other people sitting in the audience and all the other people in New Jersey who are funding your school district for those really awesome AP scores and SAT scores and the New Jersey state testing, whatever that, the park or whatever that is now. Those are great scores. Want to reiterate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Don Pope. I'm from Holmdel, 869 Holmdel Road. In regards to the family environment and the parental notification, I have a gay daughter and I have a non-binary grandchild. And I'm very happy with my little non-traditional family, by the way. When my daughter was in high school, she came home one day with a friend of hers who was 16 years old, a young man who was distraught. He had a backpack on his back, and he had just been thrown out of his house by his parents. He was verbally and physically abused by his parents because he came out to them. And I can't emphasize enough that the fact that we all have family environments, and many of us have very loving and kind and accepting family environments, but they're not all that way. So that in situations like that, where a child comes out to a teacher and the teacher is required to call the parents, you just don't know what that family environment is and what the situation might be for that child. It could be a very traumatic situation. It could be abusive. They could be physically and emotionally abused. And I would ask that the board please consider that when they vote tonight.
Are we to the non-Holmdel people? I don't want to cut in.
Yes, please. I think we're fine now. Thank you.
Okay, I live in the small town come metropolis of Madawan, down the lane there. And first I want to thank you for your efforts to try to stop the suicide, the horrible problem that we have, the epidemic of suicide. Oh, sorry.
You need to speak to the mic, thanks.
I just want to thank you all for your efforts to stem the tide of this horrible suicide epidemic. And I don't support bullying for anyone if they're gay or transsexual or straight or anything like that. And unfortunately, I was a victim of bullying as a child. It blew me out of school, actually. So the point I want to make is I come from an America where people were allowed to have different opinions and they didn't have to hate each other. And it wasn't this circus the media is creating where we're supposed to be against one another. That's essentially Marxism or communism, the rich against the poor, Black against the white, the proletariat against the intelligentsia. This is something that we're being dragged into to destroy our country, I feel.
And also, when did children wake up and become adults? When did a first grader or a sixth grader become the master of their own entire destiny when a nurse couldn't give them the medication that they forgot, in school? It just doesn't make any sense that children should have that amount of autonomy, especially when their brains haven't even, they're dealing with all kinds of peer pressure, and plenty of people are getting bullied. It isn't the only LGBT, everything, the trisexual community. Believe me, I was a little kid who wasn't homosexual, and I get the crap kicked out of me enough where I never even took the SAT. Congratulations to everybody else who did the 700. Anyway, so I think that we should have a dialogue where we respect one another, and I believe we all care for our children, whether we're gay, very elegantly, addressed by this gentleman, or people that have children in a traditional family. We all care for our children, and that shouldn't be the issue. They should never be bullied. They should never be felt to be worse, than a regular human being. I think that's detestable. And so basically just the whole idea that why is a child, and when did a child become an adult when they weren't sure whether to eat their peanut butter and jelly sandwich or give it to someone that was pulling their hair? You're 1 inch off of, riding a tricycle, and now all of a sudden you're controlling the destiny of your entire life. And also there's terrible evidence of people. I have a friend who was born a woman, and now she has a beard, and she's a lovely, lovely lady, but she regrets the bad advice that she got to transition. And just remember, we all love our children. We want what's best, but we don't want our children to be parents until they get married and have their own children. That's all. Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm just here speaking for myself. I don't represent anyone. As a trans woman and someone who sat in a lot of...
Miss, can I ask for your name and address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Miranda Lukeman.
Say again.
Miranda Lukeman.
Address?
Oh, I'd rather not give that.
What's that? Yes, we do.
Oh, you do? Okay, Rumson.
Sadly,
it's in
we
Rumson. I don't want to give the...
Just the town. Town's fine.
Oh, okay, yeah, Rumson. Okay,
Thank you very much.
So I've been in lots of PFLAG groups with parents and children who are trans, and the parents really hate it at first. So I just want to mention that. So I'm not here to talk about policy because everyone's talked about that and very well. I don't want to debate my existence or the existence of my siblings. This is about the unspoken part of the so-called parents' rights groups in Monmouth County. 1 month ago, I decided to counter-protest a rally staged by one of these groups. I interrupted a speech by a local politician by calling out, "Why do you hate trans people?" Within seconds, I was swarmed by men and women who claimed nothing but love for trans kids. It's not about trans people, they insisted. We love all people. It's about our rights as parents. About 20 minutes later, those same loving parents were screaming at me. One man got into my face for half a minute and called me a groomer. Then he came back for another round. And that's on videotape if anyone disbelieves me. I was misgendered more times than I can remember in the past 10 years. I was called a freak before I left, something that I was called on the first day I came out in public. So I'm here to talk about one thing, hatred. The hatred in the hearts of the parents' rights groups, because these groups and similar hate groups like Moms for Liberty want to legislate trans people out of existence. The fact is they fear their children becoming trans. They fear their loss of control. But the odds are some other kids are going to come out one day as trans or gay or non-binary, genderqueer, or whatever. And I would like to ask them, what are you going to tell them then? That you voted to out trans kids at school, putting their lives and mental health in danger, because that's what you're doing. And you're doing it at the whim of groups who target the most vulnerable people in our society, to demonize them, to use them as a wedge issue, and to have handy scapegoats for their bloodthirsty crowd. It's all about the hate, and it's all been done before. So I'll leave you with one name, Magnus Hirschfeld. He was Jewish, gay, and a scholar. 3 dangerous things for a German citizen to be in 1933. He studied gender, queerness, and trans-affirming healthcare. But that same year, his institute was stormed and 20,000 books filled with decades of research were tossed on a bonfire. So to all those attacking the health and safety of trans kids under the guise of parents' rights, to all those demonizing us as groomers, to all those who think they are the only parents with actual rights, take a look at history and then ask yourself, is this what you want? To be associated with cruel and discriminatory policies? Because trans people are going to be here forever. Sorry you can't live with that. But I guess you don't mind since you've already turned trans kids into political pawns, and you've done an excellent job of tearing apart your community and your school. No one's doing a better job at terrorizing trans kids and their parents than you. So I have just one question. Where do you go after you unleash all that hatred? Who's next in line to be demonized? There's always some group available to attack. When you make hatred and fear the primary motivator for the people you vote for, you're left with a lot of scorched earth to rule. And whatever happens, it's not a legacy you want to leave your children. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Kim Lindley. I'm from Old Bridge, New Jersey, former special education teacher. This conversation is very diverse, and I thank you for taking the time. Children, as has been spoken about, is that my 27-year-old, I'm still telling her under my house, my rules. So how can you ask a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old what their questions? They're very easily led. Especially there's a communication gap between a teacher, parent, and a child. And a child looks up to the parent. Every elementary teacher, in my opinion, knows that child is running home and telling mom. So that's where distraction comes. And also in the Bible, it says in Psalm 127:3, behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruits of the womb of a womb is a wrote, I forgot, I can read my handwriting as a teacher because I was rushing. But also today I was reading in CBN News, a teacher in California, the conversation, the title of the topic is teacher who refuses to lie to parents about kid gender identifies wins major victory. This attorney, it's from 9/26/23 from CBN News. The attorney, as he was speaking, there's a clip with more information, which I won't get into. But as I continue, it says this is a trifecta, the attorney that I was saying, because it affects the teacher, the parent. So those rights and also crosses federal levels. So this is not just a one buck stops here type of law that's we're all coming to compel and listen to and fight for the children. And as a special ed teacher, all the children are different. They grow at different rates, different modalities, and they can't express themselves. And as a teenager, what teenager knows what to do? So that's where we're there for as parents from 0 to 18. And even then, we all know as parents, adulting is a lovely thing because you're still always a parent, no matter how old. And the love of a child, we all have it and we all discussed it. And it's listening. But the main concern here is the separation of the parent and the teacher and the child. Because how can that child have the best education if the child and the parent don't have that communication, if it's not clear cut? And also in Philadelphia, they had in high school, I don't know the name of the town right now, but it was maybe 2 weeks ago, high school students went out. If my daughter was in a school where she felt uncomfortable going to the bathroom, I am sure going to be involved, especially as being a teacher, but a mom. So who are they supposed to depend on? The children, the high school children. Those children, they don't have someone to speak up for. So it's a complicated issue. However, it's so important that the communication lines be there and the rights of the parent, and it's constitutional. So that's all. I really have nothing written, as you can tell, because I'm floundering around. But the point as like the teacher that I really went into was inspired to learn, but diversification. It's life. So we need to be able to hear and speak. And if we can't do that, we're not going to get anywhere. It's just going to be chaos. But we can't lose focus of the child, not the topic, and the rights of the parents. Thank you very much for your time and effort.
Thank you.
My name is Dominic Guilfoyle. I'm from Holmdel, 14 Hidden Pond Lane. I'm a senior at Holmdel High School. Too long.
He's got you.
Thank you. I'm a senior at Holmdel High School, and Holmdel is the only school district I have known. This is my 15th and final year as a Holmdel student. I started in pre-K 3. I'm also a transgender man, meaning I was assigned female at birth, but have since transitioned to a man. My guidance counselor was the first adult at school who I told about my gender identity. During my freshman meeting, that conversation consisted of her asking a few open-ended questions to understand both my safety and when and how I had known that I was transgender. There was never a discussion of hormones or surgery or anything else besides her making sure I was safe and supported and knew how I wanted to approach names and pronouns at school and in communications with my parents. I walked out of that meeting shaking from nerves, but smiling so hard. Had she been made or felt pressured to turn around and tell my parents before I was ready, I never would have shown my face in guidance again. The trust that I have been told time and time again to have in staff, counselors in particular, would have been broken. And I am one of too few who have a safe and loving home to go home to. Her support, without the pressure of feeling like I needed to tell my parents immediately, or that she was obligated or felt pressured to communicate this with my parents despite my wishes, helped me gain the confidence to come out to my parents and later at school prior to the beginning of my sophomore year. The first day of school, something I had dreaded for years because of constantly having to introduce myself as and hear my legal name, was for once something I looked forward to. School got easier. I went out and made friends and actually participated in activities outside of the house. My mom said that it was the first time she had seen me truly smile in years. I've also had the privilege of meeting trans and LGBT kids from not only Holmdel, but around the state of New Jersey. These kids are some of the most intelligent, kind, and creative people I've ever met. People that any parent should be proud to have their kid turn out like. For too many of them, school is the only place that they can be themselves because it is unsafe to do so at home. The differences I've seen in these kids going from school and supportive places to places where they are forced to hide is heartbreaking. Taking away the only guaranteed safe place for so many students is cruel. If we want Holmdel to truly be as accepting and loving as so many people tonight said that it was, we need to keep policy 5756 in place to protect trans kids and other children as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Angelique Volpe. I live in Cold Snack, New Jersey. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak in your district tonight. I want to also thank you for your service to the community. Cold Snack, we recently abolished the policy 5756 and are very, very proud and glad to be one of the first districts to scrap this policy. I hope this board continues on the same path. I came here tonight to support the loving parents of Holmdel and ask you to do the right thing and abolish it tonight as well. Nobody replaces a parent, and it's not the state's job to raise our children. This policy is harmful to the family unit and has no business in our public schools. Please don't be bullied into keeping the policy in the name of discrimination. That narrative is completely false. And you said earlier, we have plenty of protection and safety measures in place to protect everybody, no matter what gender you identify as. Please do the right thing tonight for both students and the parents of Holmdel. Once again, I thank you for your service to the community And I want to encourage the parents of Holmdel to keep fighting for their children. Thank you.
Good evening, Christine Guilfoyle, 14 Hidden Pond Lane, Holmdel. As the parent of a transgender student who just spoke, I have personal experience in dealing with the school and my student, and obviously a vested interest in seeing this policy remain for others. Our experience has been positive, and we are grateful for the professional, thoughtful, and caring way the school staff has worked with us. When we started this journey in middle school, I was made aware that as a parent, this school did not need my permission to change my student's name or gender on school records. I was not happy about this. Like a lot of parents that spoke last week and tonight, I was upset that something seemingly so important did not require my approval. What I have come to realize is that these protections are not for families like mine or a lot of other Holmdel families. We have a loving, supportive relationship with our children, and it is safe to come home to us with this information. We have the benefit of a large, accepting network of family and friends too. The sad truth is that not everyone does. This policy protects that child, the most vulnerable. It does not exclude the parents, but seeks to create a space to support the student. I feel like there were some misconceptions that were said tonight and last week that I feel is important to clarify. That this policy prohibits the school from telling the parent. As I read it and as I understand it, that's not the case. It doesn't require them, does not require the school to tell you. It simply gives everybody time to figure out what the safest and most appropriate way to have that conversation is. I also heard that it's an opportunity for the school to advocate for surgical or medical interventions, that some slippery slope, that we go from changing pronouns in school to all kinds of surgery and everything else. It's just not the case. It's simply giving mental health professionals the time with the students to process their feelings and to come up with a safe plan for themselves.
Christine, can I ask you to finish up?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It creates an atmosphere of inclusion and safety for all children. I'm reminded of the mother who spoke last week about her daughter with disabilities. When we create a school atmosphere of support and inclusion for one group, it has a ripple effect for all groups. The suicide rates have been discussed, but just one I want to leave you with that hasn't been said. Having at least one accepting adult can reduce the risk of a suicide attempt among LGBTQ youth by 40%. That's a lot. Safe schools, save lives. Please keep the policy.
Thank you. I'm sorry we're not having a round two of people coming up. We're ending it at one comment per person tonight. Thank you. So, ma'am, thank you.
Phyllis Camera, One Round Hill Court, Colton. Parents in Holmdel and around the state of New Jersey want transparency. Children are safer when parents know more about what's happening in school. Parents are responsible for their children, minors, in every respect until they reach the legal age of 18 years old. Therefore, please support a family-centered approach by abolishing policy 5756. There should never be a policy that deliberately keeps parents uninformed about the well-being of their children, particularly in the case of a child experiencing gender dysphoria. Children who believe in the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, as well as middle and high school students, do not have the mental, emotional, or intellectual maturity to decide what their parents should and should not know when it comes to their health and well-being. Marlborough School Board Attorney Mark Zittimer stated, Keeping parents in the dark about important issues involving their children is counterintuitive and contrary to well-established U.S. Supreme Court case law that says that parents have a constitutional right to direct and control the upbringing of their children. Please work to expand communication between schools, educators, and families by abolishing this policy while still implementing NJ-LAD. Abolish policy 5756 to support common sense, family-centered approaches. Please advocate for parents' rights.
Good evening. My name is Ron Mack. I'm from Matawan. Thank you for the service you do here. I want to say that a lot of these things are portrayed very positively. You're in a position tonight. You're gonna have a dichotomy of history with whatever you're gonna vote tonight. It'll go one way or the other. Everything's portrayed as being very rosy on the LGBTQ policies and the outcomes of it. I caution you to Google Chloe Cole. The outcome's not positive. This is a growing industry, $2.1 billion industry, and it's growing. Legally, things are happening where Chloe Cole has gone back. She had this, we're talking about minors. Most of the students are minors. And she's going back and suing the people in her life that led her this way when she was a minor, and now she's an adult 5 years later. Legally, consider where we're headed with this, because if they're going to come back 5 years later and start suing doctors and others, this needs to be a part of the consideration. If you don't repeal it tonight, it stays in place de facto. Repeal it.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Woodruff, and I am a resident of Morganville, a business owner in Matawan, and a mom and a grandma. Thank you very much, board, for all you've done, your time dedication to the community, to the parents, and to the children. We appreciate it. It does not go unnoticed. Parents with children in the school district are extremely busy with work. They're running around with their kids. They're trying to raise them. They're going from one extracurricular project to another. And when I talk to them about what's going on in the schools and the curriculum and this 5756 policy, they look at me in disbelief. So I'm here for the parents and for future generations. I speak on behalf of all the children who are vulnerable and do not have a voice. We need to protect all of God's children, including those who are confused about their gender identity. However, adopting 5756 is not the right way and will only lead to more confusion, hostility, increased bullying, and sexual harassment. We now know that this policy is not mandatory, but rather a guide. And I typically regard a guide as something that's positive to follow. Whether the 5756 policy is a guide to follow or mandatory is bizarre either way and should be disturbing to all parents. Parents are responsible for their children from the day they are born for a lifetime, emotionally and financially. Why the government thinks that they should be in charge of the students' emotional balance is beyond me. I just want to make some points. So many people said such great things. So I just want to make a couple of points and reiterate a few. As mentioned before, if anyone's read the 5756 policy, it's a job in itself. I don't know how the teachers are even going to follow it. It just puts an undue burden on the teachers when they're supposed to be teaching the 3 R's. Children are already protected, as it was mentioned before, under LAD and the anti-bullying laws. So why we need an extra policy, I don't know. It seems to me that this is almost like special rights rather than just everyone equal rights. And when did the children, as a gentleman John said before, when did the children start ruling what's going on and how I'm going to be treated and what do you want to call me and have special bathrooms and treat me? I just don't understand it. I think it's 25 plus years old you have to be before you can, scientists say, before you can really make good decisions. This policy teaches kids to lie to their parents. It has teachers being untrue to the parents. They talk about gender dysphoria. I talk about gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria has risen 4,000% in the past 5 years. This is not an accident. This is by design, as the gentleman said before. TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, they're all promoting this gender confusion. And I truly believe the drivers of this movement are sinister people who financially back major public entities. These people want to take control of our children at a young age when they are impressionable and vulnerable. This policy causes division within the schools, an adversarial relationship between a parent and a child, and only serves to fuel a dangerous environment and chaos. If we do not stop this agenda now, it'll only get worse, and it will not end well for the children. Woman said something before about children and hatred. I don't usually get offended, but it's not anything to do with this. We want the children to be safe. We want the children to be raised healthy and emotionally well. And the last thing we want to do is hide this stuff. And another thing is they talk about outing. If all these kids are allowed to use,
if I can ask you to conclude your comments. Can you finish up?
Yes.
Please. Thank you.
As taxpayers, we are mandated to fund the public schools. Therefore, taxpayers have the right to voice their concerns on school policies, particularly when the interests of the innocent children are at hand. We urge you to follow Hanover's decision last night and repeal and abolish 5756. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Judy Bacon from Marlborough, and I want to read a statement that was sent to me from a senior of a high school in Monmouth County whose name and school have been removed because of her status. She says, I am one of those transgender youth students who attends high school. I was outed by my nurse at school, and it caused a lot of emotional and physical abuse at home. She did it without me knowing and then apologized. I ended up getting sent to a homeless shelter and a hospital. Then I had more problems with my family. Transgender students such as myself should be able to go to the bathroom and not feel sick to our stomachs every time we do. I always notice myself having so much anxiety about being harassed. If this policy protects us, why get rid of it? I should be able to play sports with the gender I identify with without people having biased opinions. This is why these policies are important for transgender youth such as myself. I think my statement needs to be heard because it seems like they don't know their youth like me. I couldn't get a ride to be here in person, but wanted this statement to be read. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're gonna have, if there's one final comment. So if not, we're gonna conclude these comments. So if there's one more person, that'll be the final comment. Thank you. Since you guys are a tie, we're gonna have 2 comments. A very equal broker here. Thank you.
Okay, my name's Dan Finn, Aberdeen, father of 5, grandfather of 5, retired military. I need about 30 minutes just to unpack some of the misperceptions.
You got 3.
Okay. Since I became aware of what was actually in 5756, I've spent a lot of time and effort talking with teachers, board members, and administrators about how in the world this could happen. Unfortunately, most parents don't even know the facts about what's in this policy, or I think this place would be packed full of residents and concerned grandparents. I was asking the same question when the dictates of the state were forcing us all to wear unfitted cotton masks made in China that are like a chain link fence for mosquitoes. They don't keep out the mosquitoes, but they sure have known adverse effects, especially extended use by children and elderly. This, along with the rollout of the LGBTQ curriculum guidance, led me to decide to pull my youngest son out of the public school. I'm really mad about that because my mom was a teacher. I raised 4 other kids in this public school system, and I think it's a shame that I felt compelled to do that. I had confidence in our public schools up to a few years ago. So how do policies like this happen, especially when they contravene principles clearly laid out in the state constitution, US Constitution, historic norms, and our God-given rights confirmed by his word and common sense? And by the way, as a Christian, I want to make it clear that I believe in the God of the Bible, and some other groups that claim to represent faith values, such as the United Church of Christ, are far from that. So really, it boils down to a liberal governor, government overreach, unelected state board of education members that are appointed by the governor, liberal school administrators, counselors, and child psychologists that are supposed experts. When you take God out of the school, you take values out of the school. When you take values out of the school, you take discernment and morality out of school. When you take discernment and morality out of school, you get harmful consequences and confusion. And I think that's where we're at. And this policy is harmful on any objective level. And the LAD is harmful, and that's a whole separate issue. But this thing about the bathrooms, all students may use the bathrooms according to their gender identity. Kindergartners, 5th graders. I mean, are you kidding? And the sports, it's so unfair to girls and women. It's just outrageous. So the LAD needs to go, and we need to throw the liberals in Trenton out of there. I would like to just thank you for this being on the agenda and for you taking a vote on this and with courage. And I hope you have resolve and common sense to stand up against this government overreach, because that's really at the core here. It marginalizes the 99% and actually harms the less than 1% it purports to help. And that's notwithstanding the supposed protections that are already provided for elsewhere. So I pray God may direct your paths and have mercy on us all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hello, John Giampolo, Blue Hills Drive, Holmdel, New Jersey. I think I don't need to tell this Board of Ed that this is government overreach. You already know that. I don't need to tell this Board of Education that the vast majority of Holmdel parents want policy 5756 abolished. I think you all know that. I think you all know that during the last Board of Education election here in Holmdel, the candidates that won the election were the candidates that prioritized parental rights in the face of this new sex ed mandate. You know that. And I think you know that the way each of you vote on this issue will not be forgotten by Holmdel parents. Now, I see that this week, like last week, we have a number of activists who don't live in Holmdel coming here to tell Holmdel parents that we don't have the right to be notified by the school about our own children. We even heard a Holmdel parent in favor of this policy say that, or rather, I should say, admit that it's not designed for parents like her. But in the rare instance when a child genuinely needs to be protected by their own parents, there's already laws and procedures in place to protect children from genuinely abusive parents. This policy is not designed for that and does not do that. Rather, this policy is designed to drive a wedge between the parents and their children, between all parents and their children, not simply anyone selectively, not the very, very few or very, very rare instance where a child is facing genuinely abusive parents. That's not what it's tailored for. It's designed to apply to everyone. We've also heard some speakers say that this policy is not going to lead to gender-affirming therapy or children receiving gender-affirming therapy without parents' knowledge or consent. Really? Well, in a previous Board of Education meeting, I think you all remember that one of the books that was proposed to be implemented actually contained a 1-800 number for children to call to receive that type of gender-affirming therapy without parents' knowledge or consent. We've also heard some speakers say that you don't need the school to respect parents' rights and wishes, to inform parents if their child comes to school asking to change their gender or whatnot. That they don't need the school to do that, because if the child behaves that way, then the parents are going to find out anyway. Well, if the parents are going to find out anyway, then what use is this policy to begin with? I think this Board of Education can see right through this policy to exactly what it is, and will vote appropriately. Thank you.
Well, I'll first to say thank you to everyone who's stayed here tonight, 9:30. Last week, I believe we had 2 hours and 45 minutes of discussion on the same topic. So I can tell you on behalf of the 9 board members, a couple of board members had previous commitments tonight, so you don't see them here tonight. But I can tell you all 9 are absolutely invested in this. This is serious to them. They do not take this conversation lightly. So what we're going to do now is we're up to the part where we do our vote. So this is action items. So what we're going to do first is we're pulling action items number 5 and number 16. So board members will be voting on items 1 through 4, 6 through 15, 17 through 49. So what I will need is a motion for those numbers.
Move.
And a second.
Second.
Okay. And any discussion? I see none. Mike, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Reddy.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Wall.
Yes.
Dr. Kalor.
Yes. Can you hear me? Here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
All right. Yes.
Mrs. Tasillo.
Yes.
Mr. Buckley.
Yes.
Mr. Damari.
Yes.
Mr. Mann.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Michael. Now we'll do item number 16. Acceptance of retirement, physical education teacher, Holmdel High School. Whereas Miss Melinda Brenner has served Holmdel Township Public Schools with distinction since September 1st, 2004. And whereas Miss Brenner has faithfully executed her duties with skill and competency. And whereas Miss Brenner has earned the respect of her colleagues and community residents. And whereas Miss Brenner has submitted a letter announcing her retirement from the Holmdel Township School District effective October 1st, 2023. Can I have a motion? Motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I see none. Michael, roll call.
Hello.
Mr. Reddy.
Yes, and congratulations and thank you for your 20 years of service. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Mr. Wall.
Sorry. Yes. Congratulations.
Dr. Kalor.
Yes. Congratulations.
Mrs. Tasillo.
Yes. Congratulations.
Mr. Buckley.
Yes. Congratulations.
Mr. Damari.
Yes. Congratulations.
Mr. Mann.
Yes. Thank you and congratulations.
Motion passes. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mike. Item number 5, approval to rescind and abolish policy 5756. Now, therefore, be it resolved that in accordance with bylaw 0131, the Holmdel Board of Education hereby rescinds and abolishes policy 5756 in its entirety. Can I have a motion?
Move.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion?
I have something to say.
Okay.
All right. Since I'm on a pre-planned vacation, I've joined remotely. Hope you can hear me well. I want to invoke a quote from our late friend and board member, Mike Sokol. Let's take a philosophical approach to this issue. Just as this world and country is divided, our community is divided on some issues. There's nothing wrong in having different opinions. It comes to a head when each side refuses to look at what the other is saying. My faith in God teaches me that it is my duty to lend a helping hand to marginalized human beings. I, for one, learned a lot after having joined the board about how much our community cares for their children and how strong each family's belief system is, as it should be. One group is afraid the school is lying to parents, is afraid Marxist ideas are being pushed, and this could lead to genital mutilation, extremely strong words that are, of course, scary. The other side is afraid for the child who has no other resort with an unsupportive family, a family that is not yet ready, or a child who is not yet ready to tell their family. Yet, even if the family were to turn out to be supportive later, as a student and mother just spoke, revealed to us. Historically, the LGBT community was treated with prejudice, and their fear is understandable. Instead of spreading the divide with fear and ending up with animosity, we could make an example of our community by making a decision that actually looks at both sides and bridges the gap. At the risk of sounding idealistic, I think we could start making history at this meeting. We could take time to see if we can set up a new policy that bridges the gap in the next 2 months and bring this up again in December, where concerns of both sides are equally addressed. I think village school and perhaps Indian Hill can be excluded. Maybe a time limit to the period of confidentiality can be given during which we can support, find resources for this child, or even counsel the student on how to tell her parents. Sorry about that. These are just a couple of... Sorry about that. Sorry about... I'm sorry about that. Just a few seconds. Oops. Okay, I'm back again. Sorry about that. So anyway, when the new policy is in place, we can bring this up again. In the end, repealing the policy will not change anything. The teachers are not mandated to tell parents even if the policy is repealed. If the policy stays in place, teachers can use their discretion, especially if it affects the health, which of course would include possibility of hormonal treatments or surgery, to bring a case to the administration. Repealing this policy serves no purpose. There are no legal risks if it stays in place. In fact, repealing it opens us up to litigation. Lastly, I am shocked at the speed with which this is being pushed. Only 12 days ago, this came up to me. It's a contentious topic, so why the rush? We have an ad hoc policy committee with its first meeting on October 4th. We could take this up first. I'm sorry, there's a... Okay. I strongly urge the board to vote no today and bring this up again in a couple of months. My vote would be a no when the voting comes up.
Thank you, Sarika.
I apologize. There was train running past this part just as my speech was starting. I apologize.
Thank you, Sarika. Mike, can I get a roll call?
Are you still doing the session?
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't see your red light.
Yes, yeah,
sir.
Sorry.
Absolutely.
I have a couple of things to say. I'll try to keep it brief. Some of it is my opinion. And one thing that's great today, no matter where everyone stands, I think it's fantastic we're all talking about it because it matters a lot. Because my view is that every board of education in the state of New Jersey was defrauded by a company out of Toms River. And I'll get to that. But I want to start off with And if you hear a couple of the points, regardless of where your view is, and I know I was attacked for politics, just as a footnote, is from someone who has run about a dozen times for local office and state office. So it's very important to know from whence these comments come and from who they're coming from. But I, first of all, have a message for every single child, regardless of background, how you feel, regardless of any of the issues that are currently before us. If you're a trans individual or however you share your views with your parents, or whether you're not sharing with your parents, you have a home in Holmdel schools. You are protected in Holmdel schools, not just by the law. We're talking about a policy, and frankly, we're spending a lot of time on a policy that was developed under, from my perspective, fraudulent circumstances with a 20 policy dump in May of 2019. And by the way, a number of board members were in here. This was when Vicki Flynn was board president and Eileen Briamonte, who is not here this evening to vote, I wish she was vice president. So some of the members weren't here during that time. But the message to all children is you are absolutely protected, not just by the law, but in fact, regardless of a piece of paper that was shipped out of Trenton, listed as mandatory, and it was never mandatory, ever. You're welcome here. You're welcome at any meeting. And just as a footnote, we did form, the board president and the board did form a policy committee. So the conversation to the individual who was speaking earlier, the conversation is absolutely continuing. And it could be brought together with folks that are looking for legitimate solutions to some of the real problems that our society is engaged with today. But I've got a couple questions. Where's High Tops tonight? Familiar with High Tops? Where's Garden State Equality tonight? They left you. They abandoned you tonight. High Tops, a radical organization, in a videotape to the parents of this school said, being trans is a phase. A phase, okay? This is the same organization that was just outed, brutally outed, for the techniques they use, using racism, to dive into the classroom where you cannot opt out to get to the children. You may not call that grooming, but I'll sure as hell call it recruiting. Garden State Equality, the executive director, in a video, is interviewing a very, very young author who was assigned at conception, a girl, at conception, not paperwork in a hospital. That individual wrote a book called I Am a Prince. The Garden State Equality director, who should be in this room and is a coward for not being in this room, said that book should be in every child's room and every library in every school, and should be as easily read by children of all ages. And that drives a key point, which is appropriate, regardless of where you stand, which is what is not appropriate. And you may not call it grooming, but I'll be damned if they're not recruiting. So this individual who wrote this book was assigned female, had a double mastectomy, and is engaged in heavy hormone therapy vis-a-vis testosterone. This is in the, you can go to their Instagram. They're very proud of it. It's their signature. We are all experiencing collectively a legal education cartel, and it takes many different forms. The policy itself we mentioned the policy. It was May 2019. That's a fact. It was drafted by Strauss Esme, which is not a state policy, contrary to the folks at UCC had said earlier. It's not a state policy. They listed it as mandatory, and it was dumped in. And in fairness to all the board members, very hard to read a policy that snuck in with 72 hours notice. Very, very difficult. So regardless of where you stand in life, think about the last time somebody lied to you and how you felt when you discovered that they lied to you, whatever the issue may be, and what you may or may not do to rectify that. There are many reasons why this policy is inappropriate. My view is that removing this policy is pro-child, is pro-trans, is pro-student. It's not anti-student. It's pro-student. And for the folks who haven't read the policy and anybody who commented, please make sure you read the policy. On the politics, if you take a close look, you need to look at Trenton. You know, it's interesting. Sometimes board members are attacked for being political. Politics have been a rancid part of Trenton politics for years. And it starts at the top with Phil Murphy. This is reality. The New Jersey Department of Education and the New Jersey Board of Education have been absolutely radicalized. If you read their minutes and you look at their membership, you will see precisely the politics that you abhor. We abhor it too. We would like to run under home rule a local district according to the families that pay the taxes, that fund the salaries and pay for the buildings and the things of that nature here. It should be for you. It should not be something different. We mentioned a little earlier the policy history. My view, my own individual view, is that Murphy is using this policy and the children as a proxy, frankly, to audition for president. It's no surprise to me that he would not care about gender mutilation when he doesn't care if your child is killed when it's simply on the other side of a womb 30 minutes earlier. It's no surprise to me while his wife is talking about maternal health. Yeah, that's precious.
Mr. Wall.
That's precious.
Mr. Wall.
So, yeah.
I just want to, we're getting off. We need to be on point.
I'll
We
stay.
need to be,
Okay,
we need
please,
to stay,
please.
We just need to stay on point on our.
You're welcome. Okay.
Please.
All right. So,
Please,
Ladies and
let the
gentlemen,
board
please.
member finish his comments. Thank you.
I'll stay on point.
Stop, please. Excuse
Okay.
me.
Well,
We
listen.
listened to everyone for an hour and a half here. You'll listen now. Otherwise, you are free to leave. Thank you.
No, I'll say, listen, I think your comments are great. Barbara, I think your comments are fine too. I think the First Amendment is alive and well, and I'm perfectly okay with you attacking me from a chair. I don't mind. It's okay. If we don't have conversational friction, I'm getting there, but I just want to acknowledge you do have a right to speak, and the public forum is a great one, and the First Amendment matters a lot. But I'll get back to the policy.
Thank you.
And I'll make the attorney very happy.
Thank you.
The policy references transitions. I just got done telling you that the High Tops, the radical group that I warned this Board of Education about last year before they were brought here, and they were subsequently blown out because they weren't at all doing what they're supposed to be doing with what they referred to as our kiddos, okay? This group, I'm losing my train of thought here, in the transitions of that policy, it's not clear at all if we're talking about chemical castration, double mastectomies, and other things of that nature. So there are a multitude of reasons to the individual's point, what's next after this? That conversation should continue. It's a legitimate conversation. All of the laws that are in place remain in place. The law against discrimination, civil rights, and a host of other rules and regulations. This is a safe place. I apologize to any student and any child in this district, and frankly, any district, that is being frightened by rhetoric and falsehoods. And that's why I pointed out, I think otherwise a good publication, but the editor could not have gotten it wrong today in the Asbury Park Press saying that we're removing protections. It's a flat out, either deliberate, maybe he just doesn't know, because the article itself was okay, but it deliberately frightens families and it isolates children. And that's wrong as well. And on the notion of, and I'll wrap up from the comments, that we are in a God's image. You better believe we're in God's image. And the UCC has an absolute right to convert in 2009 to the LGBTQ movement as well as Black Lives Matter, which by the way, is singularly devoted in their charter of destroying the traditional family unit and eliminating something they call heteronormativity. I can't even get the word right.
Let's,
Yeah, no, it's right.
Mr. Wall, if we
So-
could stay on point on the vote for the policy, please. Thank you.
So in sum, it's broken. It was born of a lie. It was born of a small company in Toms River. The conversation should continue. the friction and the discussion should continue. I do think children are born in God's image. And I don't think that includes chemical castration and surgical mutilation, which is $1 billion business. And I think we can get it right on behalf of the parents and the children in this township. Thank you.
I have something to say. May I add another comment?
Sarika, let's let other board members speak first. Thank you.
Just to comment on what Mr. Board Member Wall said.
Sarika.
All right. Okay,
when
thank
all
you.
the other board members are done, please.
All right.
Thank you. Mr. Sillo.
Okay. So I get to be next because we're trying to balance out over here. So there are 200 plus policies in this district, or so I've been told, and many of which are not mandatory. And so because of that, and because of 5756 being in the news, especially locally, that ad hoc committee that Dr. Kalor spoke about has been formed, and our first meeting is scheduled for October 4th. That being said, before our first meeting has even been held, somehow this policy, 5756, jumped the line and has now been up for discussion, started last week, and now we're putting it up to a vote. As I mentioned last week, this is not a black and white issue for me. I believe that the schools should accept a student's gender identity without parental consent. And somehow that line seems to be the one that really gets out of the picture. Everyone's talking about the parental rights, of which, with or without this policy, the parental rights or parental notification is staying exactly how it is, at the discretion of the school. That being said, as I did say last week, I do believe that below a certain age, I would love to see that parents are notified. Someone said, well, if my 4-year-old in preschool, but I would like to believe that at the discretion of our staff, if a 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old is talking about that it would be at their discretion to talk to the parents, in that case. But the piece that I get stuck on is that a student's gender identity without parental consent should be honored as part of this policy. That being said, this again brought up only about a week ago, and yet we are, in my mind, rushing into this, where Mr. Damari has done a ton of research on this topic and has found that, so what we're talking about right now and what we have adopted is the Strauss-Esme 5756. However, there is the NJSBA 5756 policy with wording and language more in line with what our current practice is in our school, starting with students who do not want their parents to know about their transgender status shall be addressed on a case-by-case basis, which is basically the policy or procedure, I would say, right now happening in our school. And there has been talk amongst board members about rescinding Strauss-Esme 5756 and replacing it with the New Jersey School Board's 5756. So it's my wish to keep this current policy in place for this month so that next month we can, again, vote on this, and while actually replacing it with the New Jersey School Boards Association that has the wording that is more with the current procedure. I feel that one piece of this, and I did not catch your name, but to the high school student that is in the audience that did speak, I applaud you for coming and speaking. And to your parents that are here with you in the audience, thank you for being the loving and supporting family that you are. But that is not the case in some of these students. And what I feel is missing, because in my opinion, this has been rushed. In 1 week, this was brought up. One piece that's been missing, and I feel that should be a part of this process of repealing the policy. We're out here and we're talking to you, we're hearing you as parents, but what about the children and the students and those affected families that aren't brave enough to come and speak publicly? There's a lot of them, I'm sure. And I think, and you're shaking your head, yes, in agreement with me. And I think that part of our due process in repealing something like this should be to talk to the affected community, which isn't necessarily the parents, but the students and those particular families, not whether or not you're liberal or conservative, because not everything, again, is black and white. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
I appreciate what you said there, Kim.
Mr.
Thanks.
Chris.
And Sarika. So I always like to just respond to some comments that were made. I appreciate everybody's opinions and comments. So, I've heard over the last week that some of the Board of Ed members are politically motivated, and I want to be clear that we are parents up here, and I'm a father, and that's my motivation. The second one was, why are we talking about this? As a sitting New Jersey Board of Ed member, if we aren't talking about this, we aren't doing our jobs. And yes, we are actually still focused and talking about academics. Dr. Cascone and our amazing staff have not stopped working throughout all of this. We shouldn't be talking about sexual orientation and gender identity at these meetings, being us, we're adults. And I just asked those people to ask themselves, how do you think all the young children feel, kindergartners, first graders, second graders, when we're talking to them about these subjects? Because that's what's going on at the schools today. And it's really disappointing to hear comments that the school does not respect and welcome the LGBTQ plus community. This is absolutely false. The Holmdel School District has shown that they have and will continue to show their love and respect for all children and families. So regarding the policy, there's a lot of this policy. Most of this policy I agree with, and that's all the laws and protection of transgender rights. These are just guidelines, though, and we follow these regardless of if the policy exists or not. But I'll explain to you why I oppose this policy and why I can't get behind it as it's written. The statement that no obligation to tell the parents, that's so open-ended and such a slippery slope. I ask myself, where do we go from here? I mean, that's like, where are we going? And also seeing all the exposure with the new health mandates that have come in and gotten to kids as young as kindergarten, I just start putting adding this all up, and it certainly concerns me as a parent and as just a citizen in our society today. I don't believe that this repealing is forced outing. When there's a situation where a child is not safe, the counselors already know that they're going to take a different approach to protect that child. And I'm certain everybody up here agrees to that. We want the school to act as a bridge to guide and help that student inform their parents when is the right time for them. But we've got to have that option there because I firmly believe that the best overall long-term outcome for that child is their parents being involved, and the parents also deserve this right as well. The second part of this policy that I really don't support is really the age groups that affects, and that's all students. So to even be sitting up here talking about this sort of stuff with 4-year-olds, it's kindergartners in first, second, third, and fourth, and fifth grade, village school in Indian Hill, unacceptable to me. I'm never going to get behind a policy that's going to include these young children. It's just so inappropriate. I don't need to explain why. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up here. Let's please stop yelling at each other. We're a wonderful community here. I've been around here for 45 years. I know we don't always agree, but we're a wonderful community. We need to start listening to each other and work together to create a community-based policy, find a middle ground, and I know that we can do this. Since the last meeting, I took the time to reach out people, many of them that are here tonight and spoke last meeting, that disagree with me. And I sat with a lot of them to really understand their perspective and share each other's thoughts. And I think we can continue to do this. It's okay to disagree, and we certainly need to respect this. A lot of what I heard are issues that actually are just, they're not getting repealed, okay? So we really need to stop highlighting these laws of discrimination, laws of anti-bullying, the facilities uses, being able to, people had made comments that if we repeal this, students can't use the bathrooms that they identify with. That's not a part. These are laws. They're guidelines that are in the policy. So where they're not being repealed. And I agree with what you had said earlier, that wouldn't it be great if we can amend and edit the policy real time? But unfortunately, the state has proven that that's not an option for us. So unfortunately, we can't get there that way. The only way we can get there is if we repeal it as it is today, and then just start getting to work to find a replacement. And I've talked to every member of this board. We all want to do that and find something that works for the community. So I'll finish in saying that I read a statement from another local superintendent, and it really resonated with me, and I just want to share it. I believe in addition to providing the safest environment for students, school districts are also accountable to our parents. We have a responsibility and a duty to communicate with parents all things about their children. This is not a choice, this is a duty, one that we should take very seriously. I'm confident that we can come together. We do have the policy committee, and I've said this before, Kim had mentioned it. I'll welcome community leaders from both sides. I'll welcome students that are a part of this community, teachers, staff, administration, board members. I think people in this community know that I will take the time to sit with you and listen and communicate and figure this out. So I think that's a great idea. We can create a pro-student, pro-parent policy that is best for the Holmdel community, okay, the people of this community. So let's get that done. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys and girls. Mike, can we get a roll call? Oh, Sarika, are you still out there?
I am. I just want to just point out, just one quick thing. The words chemical castration and genital surgery was used repeatedly, but I want to be loud and clear that these would include health concerns, which would then make the counselor come to the administration on a case-by-case basis. So if a child is considering genital surgery and tells the counselor, it is not, the policy states that they will bring it to the administration. I just want to make that clear, because the fact that, the prospect of a child considering surgery and the school not telling parents is scary. Board Member Wall is right, but that is not what the policy states. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Sarika.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy. I feel compelled to say a few words in advance of the vote. And much of what I'm going to say really is just going to echo my comments from the last meeting. I would suggest that our district already operates in a pro-student, pro-parent manner. As I've stated previously, we have, and we had one that spoke tonight, we have transgender students in our schools. And notwithstanding the law, the lawsuit from 2005, which was obviously quite some time ago, our administration, our counseling staff have worked with those children to, as testified by the young man who was brave enough to speak tonight. I think when he described that interaction that occurred with the counselor, that's precisely how it happens, right? And notwithstanding, if in fact the board does repeal the policy, that is exactly how it's going to continue to happen. What that young man described, the approach is not going to change, case by case basis, always with the goal, sometimes in the immediacy, in the immediate term. But as soon as it is possible and safe to build that bridge to the parents. Mr. Howard is in the house, and I'm going to, and Mr. Howard, who's actually our assistant superintendent, is actually a licensed therapist himself, referred to one of the ethical principles of school counseling. Am I getting that right, Mr. Howard? An ethical principle, right? And one of those ethical principles of a counselor is to always lean into and work with families, right? To not operate in isolation of the parents, but always be working. They have an ethical responsibility under their professional license to do that, right? So I think that's really powerful. So regardless of how the vote goes tonight, we will continue to work with transgender students in the same manner we have, in a pro-student and pro-family way. I would concur with Mr. Damari that I think should this policy be repealed, getting to work on drafting a policy that more accurately captures our current practices makes really good sense. Doing it in a way that is inclusive in terms of continuing to listen and learn from those impacted by it. But I can absolutely assure any student who might be listening live or recorded, for the entirety of my career, I've always strived to work closely with parents and to really support children and ensure that they feel safe and comfortable. And that's not going to change. So I just thought that was important to state. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cascone. Before we have a vote, I'm going to be very brief. I was up here in May of 2019, and I've been here for the last decade, basically. And I can tell you what Mr. Wall had said many times. We've gotten, and there are 200 plus policies. You could go look on our website. There's broken down into 10 different areas. We would get a lot of policies, and they're mandatory. We basically have no choice but to accept them and to accept them. But like Dr. Cascone said, we are going to treat all these students properly in the way we have do it, and the approach is correct. If it wasn't mandatory, I can tell you that board in 2019 wouldn't have accepted it. We would actually read the policy, looked at the policy, researched it, and went through it and see, okay, what makes sense for this district, for the kids and the students in this district. And like we said, and you've heard from so many people tonight, the current law is in place, the discrimination policies and everything else, that will stay in place. So all the students are still protected. And I can tell you, before 2019, we didn't have any issues that it came, at least from my perspective of being on the board for all those years. I cannot recall one email. And I can tell you, when there are issues, we hear from parents every day. I know I get emails every day. So I know it didn't all happen after 2019. And I can tell you it's going to stay the same this way. So I just wanted to say that. Mr. Petrizzo, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Reddy.
Yes.
Mr. Wall.
Yes.
Dr. Kalor.
No.
Mrs. Tasillo.
No.
No.
Mr. Buckley.
Yes.
Mr. Damari.
Yes.
Mr. Mann.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mike. I would like to read a statement since we have been at this for a couple of hours. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the Holmdel School community, I'd like to address the recent vote taken by the Holmdel Board of Education. We understand that this decision has stirred discussion and inquiry within our community, and it is our responsibility to provide clarity and transparency. Our decision to rescind a board policy related to transgender students was influenced by a critical factor. It pertains to the initial communication of this policy to the Board of Education by our policy consultant, Strauss Esme, who indicated that this policy was legally mandated when in fact it was not. This crucial discrepancy denied the Holmdel Board of Education the opportunity to thoroughly consider the policy as a whole. It is imperative that our community understands the context surrounding our decision. The Board of Education takes its role in policy development with utmost seriousness. Our objective is to create policies that not only adhere to legal requirements, but also strike a reasonable and equitable balance between students and parents' rights. It is essential to emphasize that the relevant federal and state statutes underpinning this policy remain in full effect. Our commitment as the Board of Education, along with our administration and staff, to operate in a strict alignment with these laws is unwavering. Our district's dedication to fostering safe and affirming spaces for all students remains resolute. The rescission of this policy should not be construed as a departure from this commitment. Rather, it presents us with an opportunity to reevaluate the policy from a more accurate perspective as an elective policy. We extend our heartfelt appreciation to all committee members and community members who have dedicated their time, provided input. We firmly believe that the resulting policy will be enriched through this collaborative effort. In the spirit of open dialogue and shared values, we pledge to engage with our community throughout this process. Your voices and perspectives are integral as we progress in reshaping a policy that reflects our collective commitment to the well-being of students in our community. I would also like to inform that the following due procedure, there'll be a second vote to confirm this decision at the next Public Board of Education meeting. We value your participation in this democratic process, encourage you to continue to be actively engaged. And thank you for your attention and look forward to working with everyone for the betterment of this district. Thank you. All right. You all don't have to leave yet. We're almost done. You can leave though. That brings us to item O, old business. Any board members have any old business they would like to discuss? I see none. That's okay. Any new business board members would like to discuss?
Board
Mr.
President,
Tennis?
may I just share that the policy committee is set to meet on October 4th. I'm sorry, did you say that?
Good. Yeah,
oh, okay. The policy committee is set to meet next week. And really an open invitation from all of the speakers on either side of the issue to please contact us. Just follow on what Board Member Damari said, and I think the other board members have indicated. We're here together. Let's get it right. It's next week. And let's keep the communication open. Even if the communication has friction to it, that's okay. That's how you make a real good policy that looks out for all of the folks involved. So let's please keep the lines of communication open. They don't have to always be, polite. When you feel strenuous about something, you should share what you're thinking. And then we'll be reporting back to the board at a future date, in public. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terrence. That brings us to the final part of the agenda. Questions or comments from the public? I see none. Thank you very much. Oh, okay. I thought you were leaving. My Rutgers friend. I like it. Name and address or home? Or...
Yeah, Jacob Pender, Rutgers, New Brunswick. I think my main thing is to ask a question or for a point of order is this policy was rescinded, but there will be a second vote at the next meeting. Does this policy, is it still in effect? Is 5756 in place tomorrow when students go back to school?
Yes, to answer your question, the policy requires a second vote by the bylaw that this board has adopted. It does require a confirming vote.
Thank you. Then in that case, I would like to address the board members who addressed me and their comments. And I just wanted to explain exactly what I meant. And that is not that we should have 5756 in place, that we need to be repealing it now. 5756 has been in place since 2019. If there is a rush to get rid of it, and this is the only way that we can make a new policy by getting rid of an old policy, I don't understand that. If we're going to have a policy committee that's going to be meeting in, I'm not exactly sure when they said it's going to be meeting, why not let that happen first? Please consider allowing that policy committee to meet first, to come up with that new policy before rescinding 5756, which has been in place for the past 4 years. It's been in place. It seems that it won't actually affect, repealing it won't actually affect what is happening in the schools. It provides a guidance for the teachers, for the parents, for the staff, for the students in the district. If we're not going to have any guidance at all, that leaves a gray area, that leaves ethics violations, that leads to lawsuits. Let's keep that policy in place until we can have that policy committee meeting, until we can discuss these issues. And so that way, the faculty, the staff, the people up here that are giving these great test scores, I'm going to keep alluding to these test scores because they really are great. The people who are doing those, give them that guidance. Keep that guidance until there is a new policy that they can read, that they can see, this is how I handle this situation. I'm going to be a public educator in a few years. And if I were in this situation, if I were a teacher, if I were an administrator, a school counselor in this situation, I would not know what to do without having a policy in place to handle these issues. Please consider keeping this in place until we can have that policy committee meeting, until we can talk this through, talk this out. There's no need to rush this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, Seeing no more comments, we do not have to adjourn into executive session. So can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Can I get a second? Thank you for coming out, everyone. Have a good night.